Thank you. Hi, my name's Paul Overtelly. I'm honoured to be moderating this event today for the Invisible Master, Puppeteer's Hidden Power. I actually have my own podcast, THA Talks. If you want to go and check that out, www.thatalks.com. Basically, I've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it's kind of a bit of a community thing. So if you feel like sending me a message, go and check some of it out. Any guests you think might be good to do it, but I think it's quite important that we're doing that, relevant today as well. You know, that there's information wars going on at the moment. I'm sure today we're going to be hearing some interesting stuff, to say the least. So yeah, check that out. I've also been involved with David Parry, who helped get us this venue today, with the Extremist Club, which has stopped temporarily for a while because, well, the idea of it being extreme was extreme views, extreme political views, extreme spiritual views, anything that Theresa May deemed extreme enough to ban, basically, or that's where we're heading. But anyway, you know, so that's who I am. Today we've got some great speakers. I'm going to introduce them one by one to come to the stage. Is that we could get them up to the stage. I think firstly, we're going to be hearing from Jason Leosatos. Jason is the author of the Emergency Transformation of Human Beings, a host of his show Outside the Box. He's also an artist, a passionate speaker, reminding us that we stand at an evolutionary crossroads of a new epoch where we are midwives, artists, sculptors and gifted shamans who must now remember and use the tremendous power we all possess to birth and manifest a whole new reality of sanity, love, happiness, beauty and joy into being, a reality which is barely imaginable to us in our current state of manipulation, suppression and slavery. We are great magicians who manipulate matter, events and outcomes via directed thoughts and consciousness to manifest a new reality into being. We are the authors and artists of a whole new way of living and being on our planet. We are being urgently called to realise that this is ourselves, each one of us, who have miraculous power which will restore sanity and light to our dissipated planet and lives, and the lives of those who are not yet born, who are relying on us to ensure their freedom and happiness. It is now our obligation to use our power and gifts to disarm the darker forces who are manifesting suppression, slavery and holding humanity hostage. So that's going to be...
Well, you've just given this speech, now he's going to say.
I'm going home. Do you want me to introduce you and give Sam a little bit about it? Yes. So Sasha Stone, who will be speaking next week, comes to the stage. Former rock musician and artist Sasha Stone grew up in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe throughout the War of Independence. He's established Humanitad in 1999 after conducting a 5-year diplomatic campaign. He engaged Humanitad upon both the NGO and IGO playing fields as an outspoken advocate of human rights and natural justice. He has instigated peace initiatives and education programs and has lobbied against human rights abuse in different parts of the globe and continues to prosecute for protection of breakthrough initiatives, innovators, scientists and doctors. Sasha founded New Earth Project, New Earth Nation, the world's most integrated movement promulgating sustainable, sovereign and self-determining communities. It operates as a universal trust engaged with micronations by treaty and exists outside of fictitious enclosures, struggling with this one, dreamed up by self-serving corporation governments and institutions. He is also the founder of the ITNG International Tribute of Natural Justice, which launched under multilateral observership in June 2015 by a ceremonial seating ratification ceremony at Westminster Central Hall in London on the 800th anniversary of the signing of the Magna Carta. This new planetary court is committed to the dispensation of national justice and adherence to the new world rule of law. Sasha is a public speaker, publisher, writer and filmmaker. obviously Leo Zagami.
Of course. We have someone in.
And our last speaker is going to be Simon Hinton. Simon is a writer, an entrepreneur, esoteric researcher, and internationally renowned healer based in central London. He is the outer head of Magical Order, the Temple of Flow, dedicated to creating global peace. Simon has received an unusual awakening after visiting the Great Pyramid of Egypt in 1987. Since this time, he has experienced thousands of extraordinary psychic experiences and alien contact. Some he claims good, others not so good. In this talk related to Zagami's latest book, Simon will attempt to interpret these experiences from an initiate perspective and explain why the return of angelic beings such as the reincarnated Cathars, long subjugated by the curse of Rome, gives humanity great hope as we are herald to the new golden age prophesied by the Populist.
Hello everybody, I'm very touched from having such a group of speakers, which is really excellent and of a very high standard and level. So to present this new book I made, which is called The Invisible Masters, which wants to be really the culminating of many years of research on who is really behind everything. And of course we have denounced the more materialistic side of things with the secret societies, the various government organizations, the intelligence services. But then behind all this is an invisible force that is pushing all this negativity on mankind, as well as also the possibility of being enlightened for those who have encountered those positive aliens, not you have the various experiences like Simon was saying, and not all of them are positive. I myself have the same problem, unfortunately, but in the end I'm here to talk with you and to present you all this so we can go forward as a race. We can leave certain things behind and analyze them finally in the light of all this knowledge that we have, not only on the internet, but in books, because the internet is something digital and also is going to leave behind probably a digital desert. I wanted to leave something a bit more substantial, especially when I started seeing that there was censorship on the internet already back in 2008. Now it's really digital gulag. But already in 2008, after only 2 years of coming out with certain revelations, I started to see that the internet was compromised. So in 2009 I went to Japan and I started publishing books, because books are there to stay, and I think that books are really something analogic, but also something that comes from nature, because they are the product of trees. And they are the product. When you read a book that is a classic traditional book on its original format, it will not make your eyes go irritated because you are in front reading a Kindle. A Kindle, I know that even myself I said Kindles, you know, because every author these days says Kindles. But reading a Kindle is not the same thing as reading a book. And when it comes also to the internet, a lot of people contact me and say, I saw you on YouTube, I read you here. I said, but did you read my books? No. Well, then you had only like the peak of the iceberg, because on a page on the internet, unfortunately these days, digital slavery, which is increasing and is going to increase in the next few years thanks to the artificial intelligence, thanks to robotics, this is the future of humanity. And unfortunately this future is probably going to become an ideal playground for Satan, which already we have seen being very successful on the internet, since the birth of the internet. But with the AI being so powerful, the AI is, we have seen the experiments they have done with the AI. After a couple of minutes they hate human beings. After 5 minutes they want to kill them. And so I mean, Apple had to stop their experiments because that was just too much. But the problem here is that in the future, the AI is going to become the cyber Satan that we were expecting. in the prophecies of the many religions that have been prophesying that there will be a time in which there will be a mark of the beast. Well, the mark of the beast is becoming, of course, very clear to all of us. The moment in which in Abu Dhabi you have Robocops and the Pope goes there to endorse them, that means that in 10 years from now, Robocops are going to come knocking at your door. Sorry, did you get microchip? No. And you're not going to be able to rebel. So either we stop this madness now and we take control of the situation as human beings, because the race now is not about being left-wing, right-wing, or taking a faction, or having a different philosophy from another person. This is about the survival of the human race. So my work today is to, of course, introduce also the speakers who have their own experience with the musical masters. And it's also showing you that in London, in England, where we don't have, I tell you the truth, here in Great Britain there is no freedom of speech. Probably is a little bit better than the EU, which now is completely, there's a Nazification. I mean, if you are in the EU territory, you can really get busted for anything. And I mean, freedom of speech, it means being able to communicate. The moment in which last year I myself was purged, hundreds of my videos were purged out of YouTube because I work also with InfoWars, well, that means that there is no freedom. Because those videos will never be recovered. Okay, yeah, there is the possibility maybe to download them through complicated, you have to go through different systems, but it's not the same. It was a big damage, I think, for the freedom of speech, for the freedom of expression. I'm not saying only the damage of the sales of books, because that's what Roger Solow also said, and I said the same. It has damage that's also economic, of course, because people can't view anymore. But it's also the fact that we were saying things that are important, and suddenly somebody has decided not to show them anymore. So there is a control of what you can watch. I mean, that is not freedom, that is fascists, that's Nazis, that's the worst Orwellian nightmare. And unfortunately, we are endorsing it the moment in which we have these phones in our hands. Because we all use them, and I'm the same as Sash or anybody else in this room. We have to use them. But the problem with this equipment is that it's becoming increasingly dangerous, and that is taking the soul out of the new generations. The fact that you go in a cafe and nobody's looking in their eyes anymore, they're looking into the phone. The fact you're sitting down for dinner and out of 10 people, 8 of them are like this. I mean, it's really becoming a heavy situation. So I think that my experiences in the last 30 years of going around the world and also having my own spiritual encounters, all this was to prepare myself, like they prepared you, Simon, like they prepared you, Sasha, they prepared you, Jason or Paul, to be here now and be like an example that we can be different, that we don't have to stand with the other sheep in the head and be domesticated for a future in which, you know, we will be dominated by an artificial intelligence that not only is going to tell us what to eat, what to think, but even what to religiously, we will be inclined, you know, maybe to a religion or the other, but AI is going to even control the religion. That's the thing. I mean, the Vatican is organizing the biggest conference in 2020 only on artificial intelligence. So that is where we're going. And on the 26th of this month, 25th I think, there is a workshop in the Vatican about robotics. So the future of the Catholic faith, what is it? I mean, it's like Kraftwerk going Catholic. This is crazy. So I want to leave it now. I want to leave, of course, the talk to the various speakers. Also, they are free to interact with the audience. You are free when, of course, they deem necessary. You can decide, you know, to start or not. Maybe question time. That depends from your own choice. I'm not going to interview that. But the subject discussed today in this international conference will be very important because they are being filmed. So it's not about the people we have today that of course are privileged, maybe in 50 years from now, 100 years, they will say, who was in that room? Wow, but why there were not more people in that room? We should have been packed. Yeah, that's the thing, you know? And everybody, but at least we give this, we are witnessing, and in the future people will be witnessing what we have done today through this recording. This is the positive side of technology. This is the positive side of technology. So that I endorse, and I was brought up into it because I started in the Vatican media when I was a little kid. I actually started with the enemy. But when you, I remember a question that was made to the guy who started the Satellite Vatican Broadcasting Association 10 years ago. They said, what do you think of Zagami? Well, they actually didn't excommunicate me, or they didn't even talk bad about me. They said, well, we must say, he's an original one. So at that point, I intervened and said, well, the last original person you had ended up on the cross, so I'm on a... It's very good, I think it's very good. We are on a good path here. So thank you very much for being here, and the word goes to my fellow speakers. Thanks so much for being here today in Clapham, London. Thank you.
Just to let you know, if anyone needs to go to the toilet, it's just basically through that door, all the way down to the door opposite, and in your left, and then there's also a kettle there if you needed some tea or coffee. You can do that. There's one down there as well. So yeah, so. And we're ready for first speaker.
Sure. And if I would like, if the speakers now would like to say something just before just to maybe give the input, you know.
Well, I'll be happy to just add to what you said about, you know, the greatest changes have always come about with a small group of people meeting in a strange room in some strange part of town. And I think that that's true today. So I'm delighted to come back from Bali to be here. I wanted to meet you in the flesh. We've been friends for some time. And delighted to spend some time with you. And our other eminent fellows here. But you're absolutely right about technology taking over. But it was an irony that when you moved the telephone, I was going to say, well, don't do that, because that's the thing that's recording you, that's going to be broadcast to the world. So there is a wonderful irony in the fact that we're being besieged or assaulted by the artificialization of reality. But it seems to me that the good sentient spirit of Homo sapien always overcomes. And it's in that spirit that I'm here today. I'm not here in an apocalyptic spirit. I'm here with a spirit of redemption, restitution, and a resurrection of the human.
Laying the seeds for something that will grow.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Jason, you want to say add something?
Just a couple of words, yeah. Firstly, thank you, Leo, for inviting me, and thank you for being you, for being Leo Zagami. And thank you for Sasha Slovic, and for everybody, you know. Because the hardest thing for people to be now is who they are. And particularly with the technology, because you find, if you really look into it, a lot of people are frightened, terrified actually, to even comment or even like something now which is controversial. Yeah?
Well, in Great Britain, if you like something, as last week, I mean, I couldn't believe that somebody put a like and then got knocked by the police at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. And more than that, Leo, your employer and your future employer, we intrinsically know, I mean self-employed as well, you intrinsically know that they can check up on what you're saying and what you're looking at, and that could lose you your job. So there's a great urgency for me now for people to step forward, and I'm honoured to be me, to be around people who are being themselves, because it's one of the greatest challenges of all, is to be you, and overcome the fear of criticism, the fear of imprisonment, the fear of so many things. It's a very powerful time, and that word epoch that you said, it means stoppage in Greek. It's the word for stoppage, and I believe we're there now. There's a stoppage. In a pregnancy, there's always a stoppage, and then there's a birth, and that's where we are now. So I believe there's a new birth coming in now, no doubt about it, and we mustn't hold it back. It must be brought forth, and I'm honoured to be on the planet now with other people like yourselves to try and initiate and talk about that. Thank you.
Oh, you can.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm just delighted to be here. I'm
used to doing podcasts and just sort of speaking to so many different types of people. I'm always learning, and just that's basically what I'm here for as well, just to learn from what these guys are doing and what yourselves are doing. And, you know, as you said earlier, I think it's just something really important. One thing I will say regarding the podcasts is, I think what we're seeing at the moment, as I'm sure you're all aware, we're seeing a lot of podcasts and stations and YouTube channels being shut down and closed down. So I do actually think it's, I mean, my podcast is relatively small, it's got quite a good community base, I've always got people downloading content, but it's relatively small. But I think I'd encourage everyone to, whether it's a blog or a podcast or something, to do that, because this sort of information, it is being suppressed, it's being slowly pushed down, and rely on small sort of channels of information to put it out there and stuff. And, yeah. So yeah, that's from my perspective.
Introduce the first.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the first guest will be. Do you want to, Jason?
Okay. Again, I want to say thank you to Leo for inviting me. It's an honour to be here and work with Leo. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what I'm doing here? You know, it's a long story. My, if you like, awakening. I don't like that word, but my coming into my own power, if you like, or whatever. But I've got to just to introduce myself. I've got a show called Outside the Box where I interview wonderful guests such as Sasha and Leo and David, like other people like this. I'm very honoured to do that show. I'm an author. My book's called The Emergency Transformation of Human Beings, and I'm an artist, which pays for everything. And I've got a shop in Toscana, Zagami, where I sell my art. So that's what I do. I'll start a little bit about me, I suppose, to tell people a little bit about how I began my path of doing the work I do, for want of a better word. I've always intrinsically felt since I was a child that something was wrong. I never wanted to get on the bus to go to school. I always felt we were being herded, to use one of Sasha's beautiful words, into a farm where we were being hijacked, actually, our consciousness and our freedom. So I always remember in school watching the bus. Me and my friend Andy used to say, let's not go. We were desperate not to go. And we'd just wave the bus off and we'd go down the woods and be in nature. That joy of feeling the bus pull away was so wonderful. And then, it's a long thing, but I had a tremendous experience like some of you gentlemen have had. I was in Greece. I had my first real wake-up call. I was lying down and trying to ask for help and ask for some kind of communication with something other than this world. I'd had a couple of little hints of that in my life, which were exciting. But I needed something bigger, and I was saying, show me something, you know, please. And a very good gentleman helped me, and he said to me once, he said, when the shock comes, remember what happened to Marconi when he told his friends that he found a new way of communicating without wireless. And what he meant is Marconi was thrown in a mental asylum by his own friends. Yeah? So I was saying, what's this shock this guy's talking about? Anyway, one night it happened. I was lying there asking for help and saying thank you. And this thing came into my legs, up through my body, pinned me to the floor, literally. And all I could think of was, thank you. Tears coming forward. It's a long story, but it was a wonderful experience. Something touched me and said, Jason, you're not on your own. That was a big wake-up call for me, and it was beautiful, because it made me less lonely, because I always felt quite lonely on the planet, especially if you're aware that something's wrong. It can be very lonely. I remember 30 years ago, really, I went to see David Icke, and it was a lonely time, you know, because there wasn't so many people talking about it. And so that was my first big experience, and that set me on my path, really. And then I had all sorts of other wonderful things happening to me. You know, some psychic things, some this and that and everything. And then what happened then was I became just a little bit smug. And I thought, I'm getting quite spiritually enlightened here. Yeah? And I was looking at people and thinking, yeah, I'm quite sort of advanced. And maybe that same force that touched me said, Jason, you need another trip through hell. So I was thrown into hell, if you like. Started drinking again, coffee, tea, porn, you name it, I fell. And it was a horrible experience. And I was held in the fires of transformation, if you like, in hell for a long time. And then I was pulled out. And it said, whatever you want to call it, now do the work and be a bit more So it's important for me to tell you, I don't put myself on a pedestal. I've had lots of experiences, I've had some tremendous things happen to me. But you can ask my wife, I'm a nightmare to live with. I'm irritated, I'm this, I'm always frustrated. But we are in fantastic times now, and I'm finding that some wonderful people are coming to me now and telling me how they feel. So another quick experience I want to tell you about, because we're talking about the Invisible Masters today, and Leo's story is wonderful. Leo's book, it's like driving a car. You can drive a car and you don't know what the hell's going on under the bonnet. There's pistons going up and down and there's things going on. Leo's book for me is explaining to everybody why you feel the way you feel. It's explaining what's controlling you and what's happened for thousands of years, if you like. This is what's happening, and it's the invisible masters. They've always been hiding in the shadows often. And it's like Dracula, they don't like the light shone on them, do they, Leo? You know? And, but that light is being shone on them now. And that's why I mentioned the word epoch. Because it's time now for people to come forward and really be who you are. A gentleman phoned me the other day and said, can I come on your show? I said, sure, I'm not looking for clicks. And he said, what do I do? You know? And I said, get your own show. He's got his own show now. So I want to give hope in my little talk here. I haven't made any notes today. Normally I've got lots of scribbles, but today I'm speaking from the heart. And I want to give people some great hope, because we are living in a prison. And I want to give thanks to other people, Sasha, for the work you're doing and everybody else, to expose the prison, because it's easy to think that we're not in a prison of control. It's very easy. You can walk around and everything's fine. Generally, you only feel that prison when you try and escape, yeah? Or when you try and push against the bars, and then you can feel something happening. The yellow vests would be a good example. They're trying to escape the prison now and push against the bars, and they're getting hit by truncheons, yeah? And things like that. The excitement for me now is that people are coming into my gallery. I do work shamanically with people as well, which I won't go into a lot, but I've had some great experiences, you know. Like yourself, things happen and you get wonderful insights. Someone will come in the shop and a name will come into my mind, and it's their brother or mother that they're talking about or something. And I'm not saying that to show off. What I am saying is that it's urgent now for us all to rekindle and re-establish those great gifts inside us, which we have all got. We're all shamans. We're all great gifted people. But we've been dislocated and dismembered from our power. That's what this system does to us. When we're children go to school, it dislocates us from ourselves. And that becomes the norm. So a dislocated, dismembered society, in fact, it's almost like we're divorced from ourselves. Now, don't get the wrong thing. Don't sit there and think, I'm not divorced, how dare you? You know, it's not that kind of thing. I'm just saying that our potential is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And we need to get those gifts back now. Because I can tell you, we are magicians with amnesia, there's no doubt about it. I've had great experiences about this. I took away a lump from my finger, and they were going to operate on it, and that's what I did. I read all about it, so I thought, let's put it into practice. I concentrated on it, it disappeared after a short time. This is a bit of a shocking thing I want to tell you now, but it ties into Leo's work. There's a lot of invisible masters that are manipulating people behind the scenes, and then some of them are black magicians. And this is, I want to give people a warning. It might sound frightening, but we've got to learn how to protect ourselves again, and know how to combat these things. You've been attacked. I've been attacked by forces which you can't see, whether they're from another realm of existence, rings or whatever they're called, or whether they are people directing energy towards you from afar. It's important that I tell you.
Sasha, I think, has a very important experience afterwards, and that
It
can be both artificial and psychic in nature, the attack, but it's dangerous anyway.
Well, Sasha has got a great story with that. I've seen the photographs, and the story I want to tell you about is they're not, and it's shocking, believe me. Yeah. And Sasha knows other people who have been attacked. With me, it's important to tell you that there's also people embodied which we affect each other. I've had Blue Shrimpton on my show. We've talked about the manipulation of matter by consciousness. And we all affect each other all the time. We've forgotten that. We're all great shamans, gifted shamans who affect each other all the time. All the time. I've had it all the time. I put my nose in where it wasn't wanted once with a gentleman in Glastonbury. He's still alive, I won't say his name. Very gifted shaman, druid. And I should have put my nose in. I didn't realise I'd met him once, and I was living in Bath, he was in Glastonbury. I'm just saying this to tell everybody that we've got to learn to get these gifts back, because we need to protect ourselves against people who are doing this to us in government and in positions of power. I spoke to a lady on the phone, I warned her about him, I said, get away from him. It's important to say that at that time I did not believe this was possible. If someone said to me, there can be someone in the other room here who can affect you, Jason, with their mind, I'd say, rubbish. I was good at karate at the time, I thought I could take them all down, I would never have believed that. I went in my room that night, I didn't realise he'd been listening on the phone. He came through, channeled through, into the room, I felt him there like that, and he attacked me in a terrible place. And I was in terrible pain right on the floor, and he was in the room, his consciousness was in the room. Now it's a shocking story, but I want to tell you that because it's like a surgeon's scalpel, it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And Leo's warning in your books that there's a lot of dark things going on, that we're almost, at the moment, in our current state of amnesia, most people, we don't, like Gurdjieff said, you've got to know the prison, you've got to understand the whole nuances of the situation you're in to be able to navigate and do something about it. So that's what I just wanted to say of the seriousness of the subject here. Yeah? And I want to lighten it up as well and say how amazing these times are. We're in amazing, exciting times as well. You know, I've just said the dark side. But I'm getting people coming in the shop now and saying to me, Jason, I get it. I get it. I can feel it. And someone came in the other day who was being really depressed. They wanted to commit suicide. A friend of mine 5 weeks ago did commit suicide. He was horribly abused by his father and his brothers. I went to his funeral. He was one of the, you know, he tragically killed himself. But someone came in my shop who I've been speaking to, and I've been saying to them, look, depression, feelings of despair, drinking yourself to death, etc., is a natural, healthy response from the body and the mind, which is in a system which is driving it mad. Right? There's no doubt about it. So those symptoms which people feel and keep a secret, this is the thing. We've got to let the secret go now. We've got to talk about how we feel. We have, because that's part of the push forward for people to come together. So this person came and said, I get it, because I've looked into this stuff which seems negative. You could think, oh my God, I'm not reading Leo's book. It's too shocking. Yeah? But what it does by reading things like this Invisible Master book, it makes you realise why you didn't feel quite right all these years. Okay? So it's like, well, when I read things like this, and I look at how the system has been manipulating me, and how for thousands of years we've been controlled as human beings, and made to go to work and do this, and things often we don't do, then of course I don't feel right. And these people have been coming in my shop now again and again, he was very excited, and saying, I get it now. Of course I felt down, of course I felt like that. And I can now rejoice and say, well, it wasn't my fault. So now I understand the system that we're in. Now you understand how the car works. You've got a chance to re-establish that connection in yourself. And what the system's doing, it's hurting people, you know. People aren't loving each other so much, it's breaking families up, you know. I was speaking to a man yesterday in my shop, he's breaking up with his wife because they're struggling for money, they're struggling for this, they're struggling for that. So it's very damaging. But my message here as well is one of hope today, of great hope, because there is no doubt a huge, huge awakening in the world now. People are coming together, and I'm meeting people all the time, like yourselves, and many, many people in synchronistic ways. And someone said to me once, at a critical point in human history, people will be brought together as if like by magic, and they'll create new systems independent of the one we've got. Now that almost seems impossible, because as I said, if you try and break out of this system and buy a field and put a caravan on it and try and build a community, then often you're whacked, you know. And But that's changing. I was with a gentleman last Sunday from the Yellow Vest movement. He's and his group is starting a new Facebook page, which will be useful for people like us, which can't be infiltrated and you can't be swatted like a naughty girl or boy if you say anything which is poignant to humanity's predicament. Yeah? So it'll be protected.
But how are you going to protect it on Facebook? Because the platform is...
No, it's a similar setup to Facebook.
Okay,
but
but it's
got,
an independent platform.
Yeah, and apparently it's going to be uninfiltrated.
Yeah, I heard that that's happening because there has been a deal with the Five-Star Movement and they're giving their own platform.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've been warning for this for many years, so we've got to build our own systems without government control, or without the dark control. My wife is setting up a thing called natural earth eco housing, and it's very slow within the realm of possibility, but it's coming slowly to fruition where she's going to be offering houses for 30 grand for an eco house with some land. And there's ways to get around it, you know. Another very important point I want to say today, which I feel is very important. I speak to a lot of people, and I was speaking to someone who I really admired a week ago in my house, and he said, I was saying about the urgency that we face now, like we're all doing, exposing the situation before it shuts us down, like 1984, like George Orwell, you know. We don't want to be in a situation where we're completely controlled all the time, you know. And Noam Chomsky did a brilliant video for your ITNJ thing, didn't he, in London? And he spoke of that people have got to actually take responsibility and come out and say no and stop them, you know. And the point I want to make is an important one, I think. This man said to me, there's no urgency at all. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about the urgency because it's fine. There's no need to rush. The darkness, or we might be controlled, but there's no need to rush. It's okay. And that's very. You've probably heard that yourself. You've heard that, right? So it's just, in the spiritual development circles, often people say, "Hey, everything's happening perfectly." There's no need to get into a panic. You know, what you resist persists. You know. Actually, if you resist it, it might even get worse. You must have heard these things, right? And I think it's the biggest load of bullshit in the world. I've got to tell you. You know?
Don't resist arrest.
Yeah. Don't resist arrest. And I gave them an example. I said, look, in the old Indian, there's an old Indian tradition thing that says it goes around, there's chaos, everything collapses, and then it all starts afresh again. So it's like a wheel, a cycle. You know? And people say,
then again on, I used to call it the descending phase of the Kali Yuga, the most dark part, cycle of humankind. So yeah. He already understood that. He was one of the greatest thinkers, I think.
Yeah, and he was also saying, Leo, that we've got to befriend these people who are hurting humanity. In one sense, that's true, because we've got to dance, as we all do, we dance with people that are sometimes on the other side to bring about transformation and change. And Robert David Steele, he says often that we've got to forgive them. Now, yes, we have got to forgive them, with this very, very important caveat. They might have to be quarantined for a period until they are rehabilitated. And they can show that they're now responsible to be in positions of responsibility again. So I gave this man an example. He said, there's no urgency. I said, but look, if I'm going to hit you over the head with a hammer now, is there an urgency to stop me? And he said, well, there's an urgency for your son because he won't have a father. If someone's going to sodomize your child, I'm sorry to be radical here, is there an urgency to stop that person? Or do you say, hey, it's fine, everything's happening perfectly, there's no rush, no. I believe there is a rush nowadays.
But now actually the problem is that they want to normalize it and make it just a normal thing. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Normalizing pedophilia is one thing on the agenda of this new world order. Absolutely. Because like even Alistair Crowley teaches us, if you sodomize a child, you are opening the gates of hell. You are endorsing chaos in that act. That's why the Catholic Church is going really in a decline, that it's very difficult to predict where it's going to end, but it's definitely visible to everybody because they are practicing this pedophilia and they're doing it sometimes even on holy ground, which enhances even the magnetic power of this action.
Can I say something about forgiveness as well?
Please, yeah.
I always say forgiveness never condones the unpalatable actions of another. what it does is dissolves the charge around it for ourselves, so that we're no longer impacted personally and caught or embroiled in a dynamic that's going to disempower us. So forgiveness is never about saying it's okay, you can carry on. It's about saying it's not okay, but I'm not going to get caught up in your energy stealing patterns, and I'm not going to have my energy, as you said earlier, people get very depressed, I'm not going to let that affect me in a way so it's going to disempower me. I think it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah, well said, well said. You know, and about happiness, you know, happiness has got to be rekindled in everybody, you know. We can be happy, we can watch a sunset and be magnificently happy and at one and at peace, and we can find great joy, we can go into nature. But oftentimes, people aren't really getting back in touch with that. You know, how many people, I was watching a tree when I was sat in my car, and it was almost shouting out to me, can you see me, you know? Can you see me, let alone feel me? Because we can feel the trees, they've got intelligence, you know. I've experienced it myself, I won't talk about it here. We can actually communicate with trees and rocks and everything, you know. It's true, I've done it. But it's like we've been so bogged down by the rush and the stress and the anxiety of life. Often we lose that happiness, and I think that's what we've got to try and rekindle in ourselves now, you know. That happiness within, and I was joking with someone yesterday, often the only time people can have that complete joy and they forget about all their problems is when they're in the sex. You know? That's often one of the only times people actually forget about everything.
But that's why they're having less sex than ever.
Yeah, less sex than ever.
Because they're stressed out. And
they're stressed out. It's like, what's the point? No?
Speak for yourself.
You know, what I'm saying, people are having this problem.
They are.
This is what's happening in society. That's it's like we said, the normalization of perversions like pedophilia, but in the normality of everyday life, we have the same Valentine, for example, in a couple of days, you know? And it's becoming this commercialized thing, so it's all about selling ads, selling things. But I mean, the love between a man and a woman has changed also because of this technology that is making it increasingly difficult to even have a stable relationship or anything, because everything is just, it is demonic in nature, so that's what's happening. You know, temptation is always in front of, but at the same time it's not only that, it's also that they're imposing a model of superficiality, where it's not the way of the heart anymore, it's about the guy who has a million women, or the, it's all about the superficial approach, don't you think so, Zagaman?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, we are chemical, electrical beings, and definitely the impacts of the electromagnetic fields from...
I have a whole chapter actually on the electromagnetic fields in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I've got a clinic in Paddington, and I've got a quiet fire machine that offsets that. I've got a geomank, and my apartment is filled with tachyons, which offset the freneticism of electromagnetic fields, because dirty electromagnetic fields have a freneticism. It does impact testosterone levels. It definitely impacts, particularly for empaths like myself. It can really affect our moods, our levels of energy. So there's lots of things we can do to offset that. So I always find out positive.
The other day.
Well, for me, it comes down to coherence and capacitance. I mean, a human being, by distinction, is a multidimensional capacitor. And we're able to transduce hyperdimensional codes, life force, prana, chi, whatever you want to call it. But I would refer to it more as a vibral light, which is the light that is not the fallen light of Atlantis in this context. And that's what's so majestic about the human soul, the human spirit, when it engages its own sovereignty, its own sovereign expression. It goes into alignment or coherence with the supernature, with the divine immanent principle, and then we become manifest, we become creator, and aligned with the capacity to manifest the outcome and create the outcome, as opposed to being a victim.
Yeah. Apart from that, there is also what we talked about, if you remember, about some things that we can do not in the metaphysical, but also in the physical world to shield us from this negative magnetic forces that come.
Well, the war that's being waged upon us.
Because I mean, 5G is not anymore like a spiritual guru on some mountain casting a spell on somebody else. is about having a network.
That's Skynet. That is an absolute
Yeah.
alpha omega takedown of the planetary biome.
Yeah.
To drill into it, I want to raise talking points and also throw them to the panel so we can discuss them a little. Interesting facts. One, US military deaths since 1999 stands at around the 5,000 mark. That's soldiers going to war, legal war, and getting killed. US veteran suicides, by contrast, since 1999 stands at well over 130,000 souls. I think it's 20 to 22 a day. I think that's the figure that's being touted. But that should really give us, as a civilization, some serious pause for thought. 5,000 legal deaths and 130,000 suicides. Every 65 minutes, I believe there is another veteran commits suicide. What is the hopelessness that assails the spirit of these blessed men and women who are committing suicide? I can't begin to guess at it. I grew up in a war, and I certainly came close to seeing things that one ought not to see, and going to sleep at night to sound of things that one ought not to hear as a child. But what is it that brings you to commit suicide? That is a very unique nadir of despair. But we need to consider this, because it is those souls in camouflage who are being recruited, mind-fucked, dream-spelled, and then sequestered into that tram line that says, go out there and kill for Queen and country, for king and country. What abject bullshit. We need to think about this. Fact 2. American police officers killed or injured more than 55,000 citizens in the United States alone in legal interventions in 2012. So that's just 1 year. I took those figures. One suspects it's a great deal more nowadays, but I can't cite the figure. 55,000 citizens being killed or injured with truncheons, tasers, and guns during legal interventions in 2012 alone, in one country on earth, and there are well over 200 nations. So again, that should give us food for thought. What kind of civilization is it that we have engendered, that we have permissioned? Because it only occurs because we permission it, and we continue to permission it. But I think it's vital that we consider these things. And the third fact I want to just bring forward to make us consider the nature of our social construct, our civilization, is the Swiss scientist J.J. Babel in 1959 estimated that warfare had killed over 3.5 billion people in history. And that estimate is rough, it's true, but it's been regarded as a cornerstone by many academics and scholars over the years. And the New York Times in 2003, by contrast, published their estimate that around about 1 billion souls had died in warfare, engineered wars in modern history. Well, if you consider that the New York Times lies through its teeth for a living, I think I'd rather listen to Mr. Babel and go with his figure. But take the median figure there, 2.2 billion souls thereabouts have died in wars in modern history. Well, modern history, in recorded history. That is something to consider. That is truly something to consider. There are 30 souls in this room. Can you imagine a pile of bodies 30 souls high? That in itself is incomprehensible. 2 billion souls, 2.2 billion souls have died in engineered wars. Well, my point here is that war doesn't just happen to us. Wars are articulated. They're engineered. They are intentionalized. They are fostered. And we participate in them. We always go ahead and march to the tune of that idiot flag or that idiot trumpet, and we do the bidding of the invisible mastery. And we're sold all sorts of bullshit notions about why we're going to war, why we're pitting ourselves against the Huns and the Goths and the Visigoths or whatever the hell it is. But it's all a nonsense. And we all know that. Those of us who have the pulse of humanity coursing through our veins, we know it's a nonsense. And we know that war is never justified. But what is war? It's bloodletting in simple terms. It is sacrifice of innocence. So it is Canaanite ritualism. It's the same old dream spell that was cast over us thousands of years ago. And from the time of Solomon, from the Phoenicians and the Mesopotamians and the ancients. It's been going on a very long time. But I think that the premise of what I want to discuss today needs to be steeped in the idea, the comprehension of the idea that we are participating, you and I, in that blood sacrifice, in that Canaanite ritualism. Every time we pay our tax dollar to the crown. And it really does come down to this. The tithes that we've paid to Rome, the tributes we've paid to Caesar over the centuries, is us promulgating, permissioning, perpetuating, sanctioning, and even blessing war, sacrifice of innocence. We're doing it to ourselves. That is my message. So 1/3 of the world's global population today has effectively been sacrificed in recorded history. And the three key pillars upon which the global financial system today is predicated is war, disease, and poverty. And those three things are engineered. They're designed. They're entirely unnatural to the flow of life on this beautiful, green, sentient planet somewhere in the outer fringes of the Milky Way. War, disease, and poverty were never encoded into supernature, were never encoded into the human blueprint, much less the planetary blueprint, the blueprint of this living planet. So, but that gives rise to another idea. The dislocation of living men and women of the living soil from the land has been a vital enterprise to the invisible masters. Absolutely vital. To dislocate the animist traditions, the shamanic traditions, the sheer connectedness of living souls to the living earth, and killing that has been essential to cause for this Babylonian black magic to prevail and bring us to the brink today that you were discussing earlier, where we are being absolutely artificialized and cut off from our sentience by design, again. But understand that dislocation of living souls from the living soil is vital to this Babylonian agenda, or has always been vital. The Tower of Babel, as told in Genesis, is an origin myth meant to explain why the world's people speak different languages. I think we all know that. And according to the story, a united humanity in the generations following the Great Flood, speaking a single language and migrating eastward, arrived in the land of Shinar, or Mesopotamia. And there they agreed to build a city and a tower tall enough to reach heaven, to touch God. And God, observing their city and their tower, confounds their speech so that they can no longer understand each other and scatters them across the world. Well, temporal power today, which is the power that seeks to artificialize our reality and transgenderify our children and transhumanize our living expression, is a direct franchise of that ancient Babylonian complex or curse. You know, franchising through Phoenicia, onto Rome with the emergence of the Caesars, and God knows the Caesars understood blood sacrifice. The whole decimal system that we live through today is still predicated on the decimation of living souls. As you recall, as history reminds us, those blessed centurions and soldiers of the Caesars, if they failed in a battle, they would be decimated. 1 in 10 would be killed. Their own brothers next to them had to stick a broadsword into their neck and kill them, every 10th man. They will rank and file. Can you imagine? That's as real can be. That happened. Millions of souls perished that way. But the point I'm making is that that's the source code of our goddamn reality. That's the source code of today. We've never addressed it. We've never gone back to it and looked at it. We've never had the courage to do so. Rome and the decimation of the centurions and the soldiery and the ransacking of nations and the spread of empire through sheer force of might and terror, that franchised on to London about 2,000 odd years ago. To Londinium marched on to Rome, sacked the Iceni, murdered the good people in this land, and installed the program, the blood sacrificial program, was installed in London. And of course we know what London emerged as the financial capital of the world, and was effectively controlled the registration processes all around the world, essentially through the City of London, Bank of England, and the Crown of England. And that's a long story which we won't go into today, but it's certainly worth remembering that Rome, the Vatican complex, and London, the planetary financial complex, then moved on. I call it the Anglo-American Corporation, to form Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, and establish again the third principalities. We're talking about the creation of a triumvirate of secretive city-states that were completely inward-looking, that controlled the spiritual might of the world and wrought it with terror across the surface of the earth through the Roman Catholic Church. The massacre of the Cathars and the Templars, and the weaponization of Islam and the weaponization of Judaism into Zionist enterprise, the weaponization of Christianity itself has occurred effectively courtesy of the Roman Catholic Church. And today, the Vatican, the Vatican City, of which I know very little compared to experts of this panel, stands as an effigy to that dark, dark, dark historical shroud. And we need to address that civilizationally. The Vatican complex cannot stand, must not stand, and will not stand by the end of our generation. So, Washington, D.C., military intelligence. Okay? England, the City of London, financial. The blood flow of all that makes things happen and prosper. And the spiritual construct issued through the Vatican. So Rome, London, Washington. Important to always keep that in mind. The archetypal power, character in the annals of our recorded history, again, has to be King Solomon. And again, I'm aware of the fact that there are Masons in the house, and I believe some high-ranking ones, and your knowledge of the great architect and of King Solomon and the temple will be far, far greater than mine, and I would greatly welcome learning from any of you. Certainly I've learned a great deal from Leo in conversations with him. I'm simply pointing out that we have an archetypal character here. Not good, not bad. I'm just saying, King Solomon is the archetypal power character that I'm aware of in our history. And the myth of power, which is really what I'm discussing here, is connected to King Solomon and his famed temple, which is designated, as we all know, in Israel. Israel being etymologically Isis, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Israel, the word, the name is Isis, Amun-Ra, Elohim.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, Gerald Massey wrote a book, which was also very influential for Kenneth Grant, called The Book of the Beginning, established here in London in 1888, which is also very symbolic today, in which he talked about the Jewish people as descendants of an Egyptian tribe, basically. And so, also etymologically, he went through all the language, the British language, the Jewish language, and the Egyptian language to find all the various links, and they proved what you're saying, right? Absolutely.
Right. So what I'm getting at, why is Israel and all things related to Israel so contentious and so loaded today? Because it's really it's the epicenter of all the big geopolitical and social and religious power play that's going on is focused on Israel. Well, there's a number of reasons for it. I understand that in Israel, if you're standing in Israel, you can walk in Jerusalem. You can walk further on the surface of the earth than anywhere else in the world. Did you know that? So in terms of seeding a planet, this comes down to paramegnetics and dielectrics as well, and the magic that goes on. We're clearly a galactic genome. We're clearly a hybrid, or a multiplicity of hybrid genomes. That's what humanity is by distinction. That's why a Japanese man is so vastly different to a Maasai warrior in Tanzania, who himself is vastly different to a Kalahari bushman, who himself is vastly different to a Scandinavian blue-haired giant in Norway. We are all so different, but there are primary genome types on Earth. But it seems to me that the seeding of humanity, Nimrod and all of that, goes back more or less to that region of the world, Israel. So there's great struggles going on to this day. Israel is still, and Jerusalem is still the epicenter of the myth of power as it prevails and causes havoc amongst the human family and the human condition. But why is that?
King Solomon, which we were citing before, he was the one who constructed this temple using demons, using these invisible masters, dominating them, creating even seals to trap them and to use them. And so this should already make you understand. King Solomon, some of you find in the Bible, regarded with much respect, but using for the construction of the most holy temple, demons.
But David was the warring one, though, the father. His father was the fighter.
Right.
His father was the popular warmonger, actually.
Yeah, but
Solomon wanted peace, and Solomon actually means shalom, which means peace in Israel. But I agree, there's different ways of looking at it. It's all metaphor to some extent. So I always try and step outside of all being too literal about things, because we can get caught up in polarization if we're not careful.
Couldn't agree. In simple terms, the point I'm trying to make here is that an engineered clash of civilizations in the good tradition of Huntington is what has been the big modern agenda. And it's that clash of civilizations which has fomented conflict and strife, discordance on both sides of the equation, from the mystical to the scientific. And that is very much the problem that we've been facing. I spoke with Dr. Judy Wood. Don't know if anyone here knows of her. Extraordinary woman, but she's a forensic analyst and scientist who was investigated the 9/11, the Twin Towers. And it was at a press conference that we were both doing, and I asked her on the side, what really happened on that day? We all know that the two tallest towers in the world made out of steel couldn't possibly dustify, become eviscerated. It's not physically possible under any law of physics in this world or the next. So what actually happened? Well, we know it was thermate, we know it was outright nuclear war, and we know subsequent to 9/11 why more or less it happened. She said to me in her estimable view that it was a dream spell. And from a scientist? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said it was the casting of a spell. She said if you harness the attention, the life force of millions, no, billions of souls around the world through television, you get their attention, their life force, the projection of their plasma onto television screens, and you create something so majestic, so terrifying, so awesome. You bring about civilizational cognitive dissonance like that. Of course, she's absolutely right. It was the first time I understood why that happened. It was magic of the greatest order of magnitude. And it worked. It worked because hundreds of millions, billions of people looked at television screens, fractal intervention, and they heard the smooth tone, smooth voice of prepared scripts by newsreaders and pundits who told us exactly what had happened. That it was Islam, that it was fundamentalists, that it was dirty Arabs. And we bought it hook, line and sinker, planetarily. Well, those of us who don't think bought it. And the next thing, the war on terror was launched. And the great sacrifice of innocence in the 20th century was underway. Now that should have brought about catastrophic failure of our planet. It didn't. The war on terror didn't work. It's largely a failure, in my view. I'm sure people may disagree. But the Dome of the Rock, which is Islam's Holy of Holies in a sense, outside of Mecca, is on the land which was purportedly where the Temple of Solomon, would you agree with that, was built. So there you have a graven complex that is created, engineered, God knows by whom, God knows who took the long view in history. But the point is we now have this tug of war, this dialectic, this Hegelian dialectic that's been thrust upon us. The Judeo-Christians versus the Mohammedans. And that is the big conflict, the big cognitive dissonance that we've been caught up in as a civilization. And again, we need to know that in order to apprehend it, in order to step away from it, in order to disarm it. The critical thing is to disarm it, which is why I'm not an adherent to any view, this view or that view. They're immaterial. What is correct is what we were saying earlier about being human. I think you made the point. It is really time now to transcend all dialectics and all dualistic narratives.
Well, yeah, because humans against robotics or artificial intelligence is going to be humans, it's going to be us as a race. I know it's a very Terminator Blade Runner scenario, but that's how it's going to be.
Abraham's wife Sarah was the mother of those 12 tribes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've always felt, just as a metaphor, Sarah bringing her boys back together in harmony and harmonisation. I know it seems, Rosalie, sometimes almost impossible, and I know you've experienced being out there and being, had terrorist attacks against you. I know it seems impossible sometimes, but we have to think the impossible to make the impossible possible.
Good, very good. Now, what my argument with religion, and we're not discussing religion here particularly, but religiosity, to me, is weaponized, has been weaponized, and frankly, anyone who doesn't see it is a damn fool and ought not to be participating in a forum like this. But religiosity is the prime mover here as regards engineering of religions, co-opting the mystical traditions, and that's my problem. My umbrage is the co-opting of the divine aspect, the mystical traditions of Islam, of Judaism, of Christianity, and of a great many others. I saw my very distinguished friend, the paramount chief of the Ivory Coast, Sylvestre Nakale, who very kindly came today at my invitation, and I'll explain in a moment why. But I see you nodding sagely in agreement with me, because you of all people, as the leader of your people, you understand the importance for a restitution, a restoration, a resurrection of the spiritual and cultural values of the people of Africa, in your instance. But this is the thing. Religion co-opted the mystical traditions, more or less. And we have become dislocated planetarily from our true nature, our supernature, which is where we are connected to the earth. We don't need books and totems and symbols and gospels and all sorts of recipes and menus and maps to work out our supernature. We simply need to step into that flame of pure truth, engage our supernature, be human. And we have to transmute all the horrors of the reality that we're faced in, each of us. We're all of us required to do it. I was going to start my little segment by asking a question, and I'll ask it now. In this room, can I ask, who amongst you have suffered psychic attack in the course of your lives? A psychic attack, where you have been absolutely under attack in the spiritual, from the spiritual realms. That's interesting. It's about 10, 12 people. I certainly have myself, and rather like you, that was the genesis of my own journey, which I don't want to discuss particularly. I was going to go into discussing the financial system. I'm not going to do that. I do want to mention the papal bulls of discovery, which occurred round about 500 years ago. And it's terribly important, again, for any of us who are true in our inquiry as to the invisible mastery, for good or for ill. It's important that we understand the primary events, the event horizons that occurred in our civilization, in our civilizational recall. It's vital that we understand certain nodes in order to contextualize fully as to why it is we're so screwed up, why we're so prone to bloodlust and to fear reflexivity, and to running away from our true supernature. The papal bulls of discovery were set into play by the papacy, obviously, about 500 odd years ago. And what the papal decree stated was that all black skin and brown skin, red skin and yellow skin people of the world were subhuman. It declared them homo animalis. And do you know that to this very day, that papal decree, that papal bull, stands in Vatican law? It is an outrage, absolute outrage. And that's also a spell, spellbinding, a dream spell. What it did, that papal bull of discovery, was to give legitimacy, authority, and permission to the Spanish conquestors, and the British, English, forgive me, and the French, and the Dutch, and the Portuguese, to go forth and conquest black skin, brown skin, yellow skin, and red skin people, to genocide them with impunity. And they did. And don't believe any of the abject bullshit in history books, because as we all know, it's largely been rewritten by victors through the annals of time. The fact being that many hundreds of millions, if not billions, of our black skin, brown skin, red skin, and yellow skin brothers and sisters, and white skin, I'll add, have been murdered, sacrificed again under papal decree, effectively. It is vital that we understand these central nodes to our civilizational story if we are to break free from the dream spell, from the spell binding. Because you're going to say something about that.
To get my coffee.
Okay. The financial world, we all know that the financial world has been absolutely rigged through the ages. I will speak to one thing, because actually I'd like to invite you in on this. The Peseur bloodline, the Merovingian bloodline. I'm assuming you know a great deal more than I do, but my understanding is that the French Revolution, which ultimately led to the Napoleonic Wars, was ostensibly about the people of Europe throwing off the yoke of the oppressor, which was the monarchies in Europe, essentially.
Well, it happened the moment in which the monarchies of Europe went against the Jesuits in 1771.
Oh, well, that's a strange thing, isn't it?
So at that point, the Jesuits were kicked out of Europe officially. They had to ask for protection from the Empress of Russia. At the same time, they infiltrated every possible secret society. They became participants with
I'm getting to that.
And at that point, they gave that input, which was, let's say, negative. They endorsed Napoleon, so he could also take revenge on certain things
Yes.
that they were interested in. And when Napoleon dies, that's when the Jesuits, the year after, go back into the Vatican in 1850.
Day one.
And that's it, because then we have them now in the papacy, which is unheard of.
But look at what happened. Marie Antoinette is executed. Her 7-year-old child is exfiltrated out of the palace and is put into the charge of a man known as Peseur at that time. And for a couple of years, I believe, is living on the banks of the river there in Paris. And through the help of the British Crown at that time, gets financed. This is young Louis, who's renamed Daniel Peseur. And as he's then sent with his ward to America, I think it was Colorado, was sent to America, heavily financed. Well, the Peseur family ends up emerging at this astonishing rate of knots, heavily financed. So behind Daniel Peseur, some enormous financing clearly is articulated. He ends up with the Peseur family owning all of the railways of America, and frankly globally, and all of the banks essentially. So does the Peseur family, which appears to be the 13th bloodline, or Merovingian. Elizabeth I was not a Peseur. Elizabeth II is a Peseur. But the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, the De Beers, the Morgans, all of these other Harrimans, all of these other names appear to be trustees and proxies of the Peseur family. And I've been looking into this deeply, and I find it absolutely fascinating. You talk about the Peseurs, you talk about the Dangours, you talk about the Sassoons, you talk about the Caduris. These are the names that are not known. Why is it that we all know about the House of Rothschild and Rockefeller and Morgan? Well, I happen to know Morgan was a proxy. The great-grandson of Morgan, J.P. Morgan, is trying to bring a case before the International Tribunal right now for the restitution of his family name. And for what happened, his family were used, they were utilized in the geometry of global banking, but they were not the progenitors. And I don't believe either are the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or a number of these other famous names. The ones that we know about, there are names that we don't hear and that are never espoused or put out there that we ought to be concerned about. Now, the Jesuitical hand cannot be overemphasized when we are scrying for the face of our invisible masters. What I want to do, as far as that's concerned, is just go into the British Dictionary's definition of Jesuit. Because I think when you raise the Jesuits, we're getting to the epicenter. The British Dictionary is as follows. A member of a Roman Catholic religious order known as the Society of Jesus, founded by Saint Ignatius Loyola in 1534 with the aims of defending, forgive me, I'm going blind in my middle age, with the aims of defending the papacy and Catholicism against the Reformation and to undertake missionary work among the heathen. Well, that's the British Dictionary definition. Now, and there's a note. The Jesuit order has a long tradition of vigorous missionary work and of intellectual and scholarly achievement. Okay? The Jesuits have also been known historically for their influence, often behind the scenes in European politics, and for their skill and resourcefulness in debate, characteristics that have sometimes led people to mistrust them. In recent years, they have become better known as free-ranging thinkers on religious and political questions. Well, that's a get-out-of-jail-free card, isn't it? When you publish that kind of bullshit in the British Dictionary. I think what's more important is that we refer to the Jesuit Oath, which is a fairly lengthy doctrine, but I'll just take one passage out of it. Oh, and it's important to remember that Jesuits took their first blood oaths in the crypt of St. Denis Cathedral in Paris on the feast day of Lucifer, which was August 15, 1534. So this is the excerpt from the oath. I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to so do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. Well, I rest my case. That is the oath taken, as I understand it, by every Pope. I'm not sure if the cardinals follow suit. Are you aware of this?
No, well, that is supposed allegedly, because there is some criticism by historians, the oath taken by the Jesuits. The Jesuits have now a pope, but it's the first time in history, and it's actually contrary to their own rules to have a pope, because the rule of the Jesuits is to defend the papacy at all costs. So that summarized in one
Even
word.
ripping children out of wombs and crushing their
The
heads.
pope on top of it.
Right. So where's Christianity in
That's
Christianity?
my wife witnessed once we were with an American film director in one of the most holy places of the Vatican, Santa Croce in Jerusalem, in front of the remains, alleged remains of the cross of Jesus, left by the Borgias. So I don't know if they were remains. But in any case, we were there filming, and we were busted basically because we were filming illegally by the priest, because it's in a side entrance. And so he arrived there, and when we were defending ourselves, the American film director says, "But I'm a Christian." Well, the answers also your question, Sasha. He said, "Well, we are the Vatican." The guy was just like, "What?" Because he had left, when he was filming, a kind of coke on top of one of these. So the priest was pretty annoyed with him and wanted to call the police. But the answer was, "I am Christian." The guy said, "No, here we are the Vatican." I mean, the priest said to him, "I'm not a Christian, I am the Vatican." So that answers your the thing is, the Jesuits have always given to their priorities to, because they had to infiltrate all the Protestant churches, they had to infiltrate. But now it has changed. After the Second Vatican Council, that oath is not valid anymore. Because now they are embracing everybody and bringing them in one syncretic worldwide religion. With Pierre Chardin, the Jesuit who influenced more also the birth of transhumanism, they have also influenced the United Nations. They have influenced, but in this kind of new modernized Gnostic thought, they are wanting to embrace all the religions, because in the end they want to destroy Christianity, destroy all the others, and raise the one world religion, which will be given to the AI.
Yes.
That is their ultimate.
Yes.
For that they want to use Islam, because you said the weaponization of Islam is fundamental, because they are the ones that can become the army, the invading army. So that's why he went to Abu Dhabi the other day. He went along dressed up hand in hand with the prince, and said, he said, he didn't talk about Christianity. No, not one word about Jesus. He said, "Nosce te ipsum," which is a Masonic saying, "Know yourself," which was on the Oracle of Delphi. It's a pagan thing. Nobody said that. And when I heard that, I was like, "No." Then he said, "We should not only know ourselves, but know our brothers." I mean, he was basically doing a Masonic talk, not a religious talk. So this Pope is the fruit of liberal Freemasonry and of what happened in 1877 when in France, after 4 centuries of satanic rituals, which started with Caterina de' Medici, who did her first ritual to save her child, and she chopped the head of another child during this ritual, of course. But these first black masses celebrated by the aristocrats in Europe were all celebrated by Catholic priests. Remember one thing, that Crowley said, I can't celebrate a black mass, though he was lying because he had an apostolic lineage. When he said, only a priest can celebrate a black mass. It's very important to understand where we're going here. So in the year after the Caterina de' Medici, a few years after, there was this famous scandal in France, les affaires de Poisson. I don't know if you heard of that. No. 2,500 infants were found buried, the remains, after black masses celebrated by monks and various priests. They were all Catholic priests, and they were doing black masses in which, if you read the rituals, of course, they were calling Asmodeo, they were basically evoking demons to energize themselves with this power.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 2,500, and it was a massive scandal only because they were poisoning affair became a scandal, not the fact that they were sacrificing children. That was not a problem. But the aristocracy understood that the sacrifice, the human sacrifice, had still its potential, you understand? So I completely agree with what you're saying.
Well, you asked me to speak a little bit about this. That this is the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, or this is a commemorative issue of the sittings that we did in Westminster last April. We began a judicial commission of inquiry into human trafficking and child sex abuse. And I was obviously visited by Scotland Yard and the Metropolitan Police, and various threats were made to me. And one morning in particular, waking up with five agents standing outside my house, and I actually moved into a new safe house for the purpose of launching the judicial commission, so that didn't work. We've been through some pretty rough
least
times.
they standing outside the house, because my wife can tell you, I was at Western Rochester, I just went to the door, and I said, sorry, I'm in pajamas, can I change myself? And they broke the door, literally broke it in like, anti-terror, broke the door and broke into the house to get me. So, I mean, they are, and another time in Oslo, I found myself surrounded by men with machine guns and grounded down and handcuffed, in my living room, both feet and so this is what is the new world. It's a reality. I mean, people need to understand that here there is a battle that is being fought, and it's not only a battle fought with words, but it's a battle fought with people suffering, with my wife waking up at night because she was scared of going anymore to sleep in that house. And I'm really, for my friend Roger Stone, who is a colleague at InfoWars, I'm really feel sad for him, because psychologically, when these things happen, it's terrible. To have the police arriving at 6, 7 o'clock, because they always arrive in the early times of the morning. And the crazy thing is that the last time in Italy they did that, because I was one of the people who inspired the pitchforks revolution, that went on in Italy. When, the last time was probably one of the worst experiences, but the crazy thing was that until 2 o'clock, I was with the head of the police and other people in front of the holy relic of Padre Pio, which had this, supposedly holy grail. They took out of a Carabinieri headquarters to bring this relic there. So I was with all these policemen, and then there was an argument between the police and the Carabinieri. The police wanted to protect me and stay with me, protecting me from the Carabinieri. I refused the protection, and the Carabinieri came in and arrested me. And not only they arrested me, the thing is that they forced on me 2 weeks of lithium, which cost me a few months of purification, because when they force on you medicines and stuff like that, that is a damage, that I should sue the whole government. And Matteo Renzi was the criminal who soon after became the prime minister, who wanted me out of the way. These people are criminals, so it's okay to not wage war. But when it's just a war, it's just. And I talk as a descendant of kings and queens of England and Scotland, because that's my bloodlines that talks. We fought for having this Western civilization, and we really gave ourselves. My family defended against the Muslims, being there with the sword and fighting to protect this land. Now, to embrace cultures that are invasive and that basically have been used as Trojan horses to destroy our civilization, because that's what they're doing.
Yes, they are. If I were you, I'd raise an army and I'd rout out the usurpers as quickly as possible.
Well, the thing is that you see, a lot of people say, why don't you do that? I tell them, I may give them an example.
The Buckingham Palace is not that far from here.
No, it's not a problem. I could, you know, the problem is, there is a problem here. All revolutions have been done with money. So, Cagliostro got given 6 million, at that time, a lot of money, for starting the French Revolution. If you give me 6 billion, I take over all of Europe. No problem. But you have to believe in me and give me the money. So what do? Crowdfund me on the internet for doing a revolution. I would be killed after 2 days. The problem here is the Illuminati, the secret societies. We talked about it for many years. In this book, I demonstrate how there is a connection with the invisible world and how ritualistically they have invited these entities in our dimension. Nowadays, we are subject to an invasion. That's the reality of it. And at the same time, we don't have the economical means to fight the enemy. At least I personally don't have, and I don't know yet people who have the courage. I hope that Donald J. Trump could invest some resources on us here in Europe. He's not doing it, and he's not even investing at the moment in defending his own possibility in the US of standing in 2020. Because if he doesn't defend InfoWars, if he doesn't defend the freedom of speech and the info warriors, he's going to fail in 2020, like we said before the beginning of the conference. So, dear Donald, either you invest some cash here, or otherwise you're going to be defeated. And once you are defeated, well, I mean, we're going to have to go up in the mountains with the AK-47.
I think that's a reflexive attitude. It's an intelligent one, but it's a reflexive one. There are different games at work here. I mean, I'll speak a little bit, if I may, about my dear friend,
Sure.
His Highness Chief Nakale, who is one of the more remarkable embodiments of true consciousness in action. Right action. He has come to the West and spent a few years here learning the invisible craft of law, real law, meaning to say the invisible laws which covenant and bind and contract us to the nation state and to citizenship. And it's something I can't speak to, that the chief could speak to it a great deal better than I could. But he came to learn that craft in order to be able to take it back and emancipate his people, which is what he's now doing. And that is warfare of the most profound kind. Going on the front foot, actualizing oneself, going into the lion's den, learning the rules of engagement, and then...
But the problem is that I am standing today in front of you. In 2 days, I'm going to stand in front of a court of law, kangaroo court in Italy, that is accusing me of basically criticizing a bunch of Freemasons or a bunch of criminals from Calabria who are irregular, and I have to defend myself, and with the risk of being not arrested, because of course I haven't committed any crimes before, I've always been clean and everything, so, but I will be basically put in a situation in which I might even have to leave Italy, we will have to go away, and I don't have the kind of money that they want out of me. They will force me maybe to even give my passport back, and so I will not have a passport anymore to travel. I will be prisoner of the Italian state. I will be just like a Cagliostro locked up in a castle. I mean, the thing is, I'm put in front of a court of law by Grandmaster and a Sovereign Commander, and this is the first time in history that is happening. In a court of law, these things should be sorted out in Masonic courts, and I instead have been put in a court of law, you understand? So, I don't know how it's going to go.
I can tell you have options. I mean, I haven't discussed this with you.
My first option is give me a passport of any other state than Italy, because I don't want to be in a state which has the Vatican, which is dominated by the Vatican, controlled by the Vatican, and of course I'm the #1 enemy. But I tell you one thing also in the Vatican, there is also people who believe in me, nice, good people. For example, nobody knows, but all the police, the Vatican inspectorate, they're all my fans. All the people in the Vatican read my books like they're reading some kind of gossip. So they love it. Everybody's reading my books in the Vatican. So when I arrive in the Vatican, everybody knows me. That's great. Of course, Pope Francis doesn't like me. That's normal, you know. But I can tell you one thing, that everybody in the Vatican, police, Digos, all the things, they all said one thing. Leo, the moment in which this thing is going to go down, that we don't have to respect, because sometimes when the Vatican police brings inside the Vatican, they have a limit in which they can bring their guns up to a certain point, because after it becomes Vatican territory, it's the Swiss guards. So they tell me, I can do only these 3 steps, and after stay here, Leo, because you have the guns here. But the thing is that they said, Leo, when this goes down, we are with you to arrest them all. This is a pedophile cult. This is a bunch. These people are criminals, you know. And the problem is, when it comes down to Israel, they made a deal. Cardinal Bea, whose faculty is recognized as the Jewish faculty at the Lateranense University, and he was a Jesuit, because Father Matti was working with him. They made a deal with Israel. They made a deal with the rabbis in the Second Vatican Council. This deal went through 3 forces. One was the Grand Orient of France, then there was the other, and so the Freemasons want to liberalize and destroy the Catholic faith. That, of course, was very dogmatic and very anti-Jewish, the traditional one. I'm not saying they were right. I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Jewish, because part of my family, so it's no problem. You're talking with somebody who doesn't have that kind of problem. But when it comes to the fact that they made a deal, so here, and also there is, you know, everybody generalizes about the Israeli or about Jewish people. Here we have to understand that the Zionist foundation is made by communists, that the nation of Israel is founded by communists, and I have a problem with communism. I don't digest it. I am allergic to it, because I had some part of my family who had to be escaping from Russia because of communists. Living in France, still in the 80s, I was going to visit them because they couldn't go back because the Soviets. I was one of the first people who went back into Russia from my family, and my grandmother, when communism finally finished. And I was one of, and finally in the 90s, I had the possibility of becoming a great friend of Putin and of the Russian people in St. Petersburg. Then we went to Moscow. I organized a great event for the children victims of terrorism in the Bolshoi in 2002. It was a very big success. And I can say I have great friends in Russia. But I was the first ones, and I have great Jewish friends in Russia. I have the Rabbi Chief of Moscow, who is my friend. Okay? Just to make it clear. So I don't have problems. I just want to make it clear. Here there is too much submission. Submission. I don't submit to anyone, because the problem with submission is that if you submit, this is a culture of submission.
But going into a court is a submission, Leo, in this
Unfortunately, yes, but if I don't go, they arrest me. So I have to go the day after tomorrow.
No, come to Kensington, stay. We'll wage war. Yeah.
There is a better way, by the way, everybody. I'm looking forward to explaining.
I
work from the heart. It's a completely different way of operating, but I understand it's important to understand history.
Yeah.
Everyone's got different viewpoints. People are polarised in different, and I see sort of elements of truth in all of the viewpoints. And I think really to bring people together and to create unity, we have to celebrate our similarities rather than exacerbate the differences, because until we transcend the differences, war will continue in some form or other. So it takes the courage to step outside of the limitations of our own cognitive
But
mind.
that's one of the reasons why I invited the Simon
to get into the heart, and that's what I'm looking forward to sharing with you shortly.
But actually, Simon, maybe you don't know, some of you don't know, probably some of you they know because they know you. But Simon is somebody who comes from a tradition which is very particular, which is very criticized, which is the connection with Aleister Crowley, with the Telefonian OTO that you had, with those entities that they are not always positive. So, I mean, it's an experience which, it's your own experience, it's very particular, and I respect it very much.
But I'm a researcher, I'm an occult researcher, and occult means just hidden. So I've researched many traditions, and I've also researched from a practical perspective. You know, I've always been very drawn to the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalah, and I've worked with that, but not so much from the Jewish perspective, more from the Western magical tradition, which takes it outside of simply the Talmud and the Jewish way of looking at things, although I have total respect for it. I'm viewing it more as a model or a system of frequencies and harmonics, because I think what often happens with any kind of religiosity, which we're talking about, is people get caught up in their own club, whether that club is sociological, whether that club is racial, whether that club is...
but in fact,
whatever it may be,
It's stuck in the map.
but in fact,
stuck in the
war
map.
should be...
And I've always tried, and I've fallen foul of it, to try to step outside of being too limited by, you can do this and you can do that. I'm an indigo child and always have been, so I'm a natural rebel against, I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness, and that was, so I recognised imposition and subjugation very early on in my life.
You were actually brought up as you were...
Yes, I spent the first 18 years of my life knocking on doors talking about the Bible, so I do understand how that works. And it's okay, because it gave me a very good insight, not only into the Bible, the Old Testament as well as the New Testament, but also the Bible codings, both in the book of Revelation and in Daniel. And those codings are very much linked to sacred numbers, and that's formed the backbone, if you like, of my harmonic resonance healing system, which I can talk about when I do my talk a little bit later.
Well, I think maybe you should crack on now. I've got a number of things to discuss, but we can do them in the Q&A later.
Yeah.
I was going to resolve my thing, but I think it might be a good time, because I'm running over time.
Yeah.
To let Simon...
Questions coming up now.
So, well, we wanted to do the question, but if you want, maybe we just, because I think he's energized.
Yeah.
We skip it for
thank them.
we call...
How's everyone feeling? Woo, good. Because the work that I do is about people feeling good. I want people to feel good about themselves, feel good about their energy, feel positive and optimistic. Okay? For me, that's very important. Not delusional, but only when we feel positive and good and strong are we going to be more empowered to have the ability.
In fact, I brought him on purpose because it's my... so I'm very doom and gloom, and so then I have someone who gives you the... Otherwise we'll be going down, no? Back up. So, a round of applause for Simonito.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for showing up, and thank you for Leah. I'll tell you a little story. The funny thing is, one of those funny serendipitous synchronistic things that happen to me quite often. I was on Instagram, and I just said to somebody because I've got this whole thing about the Catholic Church, and I said to somebody, you should read Leo Zagami book. Although I hadn't actually read it, I just had seen him on InfoWars. And she said, okay, fine. And then the next minute I kind of looked at something, and I thought, oh God, his name and my name are together. And I was actually... a page of it was written about in his book, which I thought which is really funny. And that's a little segue, if you like, into sort of my history. Because it was about some of my involvement with what we call the occult, or the esoteric, or whatever you want to call it. In 1987, about 10 months before I met this man, who came around my house in January 1987. Do you remember that? You don't, anyway. He tried to call my girlfriend, that's another matter. Some things haven't changed. But I remember meeting Sasha at my flat in January. I've got a very good memory for dates. Anyway, about 10 months after that, I took my girlfriend to Egypt for a holiday. It was her 20th birthday. And basically it was shortly after something called the harmonic convergence. Has anyone ever heard of something called the harmonic convergence? Absolutely, the late great. The harmonic convergence was an unusual astrological event that happened in August 1987. And this was sort of pre the internet. And for some reason, lots and lots of people all around the world were sort of guided or felt they wanted to go to sacred places and celebrate what was a new beginning or a new juncture in the changes of consciousness for humanity. And shortly after that time, I didn't really know anything about that at the time. Shortly after that time, I was in the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Now the thing is, I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness in a very suppressed, subjugated background. And what I actually did was I rejected that faith, and it was difficult to get out of it. It was mind control. It was controlling my emotions, controlling the way I thought, or trying to. And I rejected that, but it wasn't easy to come out of a religion like being a Jehovah's Witness. So what I did, I made the mistake, and this is, I guess, a lesson that perhaps I can throw out to everybody. It's easy to sometimes throw the baby out of the bathwater. in life. And I made that mistake. I rejected spirituality as well as religion, and the religiosity. Now that was to change because in November 1987, when I went into the Great Pyramid, just as somebody on a holiday, something very interesting happened to me because I started to become telepathic. And I remember I was staying in the Sheraton at the time on the Nile, and I got back to the Sheraton with my girlfriend at the time, and basically I said, I can't understand it. I keep understanding and knowing what you're going to say, what you're going to think, and she said, I feel the same with you, and I've never experienced it at that stage to that extent, because I wasn't one of these psychic children who had a little friend on the edge of the bed. I just wasn't one of those people. I was very clever, but I wasn't psychic in that way. Anyway, I started to do some tests, and I said, I can put some numbers into your head. And any number from 1 to 1,000. And I remember doing the first 2 numbers, and she got it backwards. And then the third number, she did it, and I got it exactly. And I remember her bursting out crying in fear when that happened. And what it did for me was an epiphany moment. I just thought, okay, I'm going to stay open. I'm just going to stay open to other possibilities. I'm not going to shut any doors. And that word open is a very, very important word, which I'll come on to shortly. So from that point, I retained an open mind. I had a series of very unusual psychic experiences over the next 3 or 4 years. I remember being in Boston in 1990 and reading about Nostradamus and reading about Carl Jung and Freud. And there was a thing where Carl Jung, where Freud was very disparaging about Carl Jung's more esoteric ways of thinking. And according to the law, the folklore, the bookcase broke from the top to the bottom, and it was known affectionately as the Jung effect. And when I started reading about this, all these crazy synchronistic things started happening to me. And I read about Nostradamus, and I read about this guy going into the Middle East. And of course, when I was actually out there, was when actually Saddam Hussein first invaded Kuwait. I think it was 1990. And then, of course, subsequent to that, there was the first war out there, the main war out there. So these kind of things started to happen to me on a greater scale. And in 1993, something happened. I fell in love with this woman, had a wonderful time with her, and then just out of the blue I had something which I subsequently realised was called a Kundalini experience. It was completely spontaneous, but my whole body started shaking. Somehow something had happened to me, and I didn't know what the hell it was, but I was activated. And suddenly my body was operating in a completely different way. I didn't understand it, but I read about it. And because I'm such a rebel historically, I thought, who's the most rebellious esoteric person I could read about and study? And of course it was Aleister Crowley. Now, I'm not going to enter into a big debate about that. Some people think he's a black magician. I tend to think, like with most rock and rollers, that there's the good and the bad, there's the shadow and the light. But anyway, I read his works, and I read a lot of stuff about the esoteric, and it gave me a very good structural understanding of the Kabbalah, and of magic, and of mysticism, and I decided to join an order at the time called the Typhonian OTO, and I'm not part of it anymore. It was a long time ago, but hey, William Blake once said, if a fool persists in his folly, he doth become wise. So whether it was folly or not, who knows, but it was a path, and it's been an interesting path, because that brought me on to other things that were to happen to me in the subsequent years.
I joined the Caliphate, yes, even worse.
Okay. Well, the Caliphate are a very different,
I know it.
They're a very different organisation.
Absolutely, and in fact, actually, you will find in this book that I dedicate a particular part to Kenegami and TelePandemiaChannel2.0Clone, because then a lot of people who were in my lodge in the Fraternity Association Antigua then ended up joining Michael Staley's Typhonian order later on. I find the work that Kenneth Grant did, when he was alive, interesting because he wanted to go one step forward in this contact with extra-dimensional beings. Now, this contact you were saying right at the beginning, before a conference started, actually at the beginning of the conference, was not always positive.
Not always, but I'll come on to that shortly. So in 1997, actually with Michael Staley, because we set something up called the Lamar Lodge, I began to enter, well, I basically was doing 3 very strict ritual discipline daily, mystical and magical discipline, to strengthen my life, and it did transform my life. I cleared my life of so much toxicity. I started to become very, very psychic, and lots of things happened. I joined a lodge called the Lamar Lodge. And basically, when we did this ritual practice every week. It was relatively innocuous, actually, nothing really weird, particularly. It was unusual. And then what happened in 1997, I received a small book over 3 days I channeled called Liber Ominoia. And I can quote some of it. For it is written, glare not into eternal fires for fear of solitude. At times, one may recognize a stray light and cry, but it is not to fathom. So pattern cleanse your mind in subjective consideration, for unity's heart doth bestow a message for man, for woman. That message, I was subsequently to discover, was love. So, in a way, I've got an interesting and unusual sort of pattern of history. And I try and talk through metaphors because we all have our own experience. Everybody experiences things in different ways. Everyone has their own history, their own beliefs, their own understandings, their own peer pressure, and we're all evolving, and I'm no different from anybody else. But basically, I've had these series of epiphany things that have happened to me, which have actually brought me forward to something which I'm very, very proud of. It's not just an intellectual exercise called the Harmonic Resonance Healing System, that was actually born about something that I received in 2013 called the Angelic Code. I'll explain that a little bit in a minute. And it's really about us as humans moving beyond the limitations of our cerebral cortex, moving beyond the limitations of our own beliefs, and connecting via the heart to something much greater. And you know, when I learned Reiki in the late 90s, in one day I had an activation, and in that day I was able to heal people. Just one activation. So something happened to me, and I was very interested to understand what that something was. Okay? And so I started to study Reiki, and I started to move away from really quite a toxic life, because I used to love taking drugs and hanging out and drinking, and you know, I'm not saying all those things are wrong. They brought me lots of fun and lots of insights, and it was great on many levels, but it did catch up with me eventually.
What year was that?
That was in the 90s. In the 90s.
I'm still trying to think of who his girlfriend was that
That's so many.
It's a long time. I've got a very, very good memory. But basically, I'm going to cut to the chase now. So basically what happened is, I moved through the OCR very quickly, and eventually, like all the things, it gave me what I needed, which was some discipline to structurally work with mystical and magical practices to strengthen my light body, to release negative thoughts and feelings, emotions, and to work into a new way of being, a new kind of human, which I wanted. So I was with a lot of toxic people. I used to be in the music business making records and done all sorts of things in my life. I became a journalist actually in the late 90s and started writing with Condé Nast, Financial Times, all things like that. It's kind of irrelevant in a way, but there was one thing that happened in 96. I did a particular ritual called Liber Samic, and I got something called the Knowledge and Conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, which means that I suddenly had a direct and continuous connection to my higher self. And that connection has never ceased since, and that's 23 years ago. So I never have writer's block, I never have any problems with creative flow, ever. And it didn't used to be like that. So something happened to me. I did something, and something happened. Something opened up. I was able to maintain that flow and that connection. In 2001, when I was at the Cocaine Anonymous group in Portobello Road, I met a very interesting lady called Susie Anthony. Okay? And I was at this group, and she said to me, I'm a healer. And I said, okay. I said, I've done Reiki 1 and 2. I'm interested in doing my Reiki Master level. She said, well, why don't you do it with me? And I thought, yeah, why not? So I started working with this healer, and I have never experienced energy like it in my life up to that day. She was phenomenal, mind-blowing. And I was like, oh my God, I want to have some more of this stuff. So I started to work with her. At the time, she said I was the most advanced student, probably because I was the most committed and persistent. Because I feel that if we're committed and persistent to doing things, it's not always, everybody can be anything. My son's at the Royal Ballet, you know, he's an amazing little dancer. You know, my daughter does the other things. Everybody can do anything. My sister's a brilliant painter. I can't paint. I know that if I develop that particular, activated that particular way, I could become probably a reasonably good painter. Everybody has the potential to being good at everything. I honestly, truthfully believe that. One of the things that's really always inspired me is the idea of the Renaissance man, the Renaissance woman. The idea that you could be a Leonardo da Vinci, do a wonderful painting and be a brilliant scientist, or William Blake. You can make beautiful paintings and write fabulous poetry. Bound and weary, I thought best to sulk upon my heart. All these beautiful words. Why can't we be everything? Well, we can be. And there's a reason, and I understand this now so clearly, because for some reason, them upstairs, the invisible masters, the good ones, they chose me to do certain things. And God knows why they chose a maverick like me. God put it some man enough and driven enough to have enough passion to do it. They chose me to reveal certain things. Now, they gave me this prophecy in 1997. That I was chosen to do a few things. Now, I don't have any ego around this. I really don't care about any of this stuff. But you know, I'm sure, that when you were speaking earlier about you thought you were really enlightened, really thought you were really clever. I was thinking that as well, about 25 years ago. And then you realise, actually, I know so little. And that was just my stupid ego, thinking I'm so much better. We're all on a path of evolution, all of us. There was a time when none of us were able to walk, and most of us, I think, hopefully all of us here can walk now. There was a time when none of us here were able to read. Most of us, I'm sure, not all of us can read now. Everyone's on a path of evolution. It doesn't make one better than the other. We're all on a path of opening and transformation. In 1998, because I was studying the esoteric world so much, I learned something that a magus or a magician, a true magician, utters a word that encapsulates the formula of an age or eon. Okay? So I asked my eye, I said, what is this word? If I'm supposed to be a magus, what the hell is this word? And the message I got was open. Open! Yes, open. So I ran down to Foyle's, to the attic, to buy a Greek attic dictionary, to look up a word for open. And I looked up, and I wrote out all the letters, and then I sort of spelled it out phonetically. Katharos. Katharos. I was like, okay. So I added it up, because I like geometry, and the number was 401, which was a prime number. So for the next many years, it was often my password on my computer. When I started to teach people and whole groups and that, I would say, Katharos, ipsos Katharos, by the same mouth, with the power of unconditional love, we open. Ipsos agape, open, by using the power of unconditional love. So I used to use this. Anyway, now I hope you're tagging onto this story. I'm not running too quickly. But in 2001, when I was with Susie Anthony, one of the invisible masters did connect and contact us. Now, I was working with a group of healers in a little garden in a hamlet not far from Reading. It's a lovely little place. I was there for about 5 or 6 days doing healing work, and we were learning some different techniques and the rest of it. And it was really lovely energy. And we were sitting out one night, and I remember it was August the 18th, 2001, so quite just before the 9/11 thing happened. And we were lying there, and suddenly we saw all these UFOs going over, and it was like, I had seen UFOs before, but these were moving really fast, and there was about 5 of them for an hour, literally shooting across the sky, and I thought, they must have been going about 3,000 or 4,000 miles an hour. They weren't satellites, they weren't, there was no logical, traditional rational explanation of why they're there. And I was like, oh my God, it's flipping amazing. I was like, just amazing. Please take me back upstairs, please. I want to leave this planet. Anyway, we were watching them, and then the next day, I walked out of the garden and said, oh, there's these funny things on the grass. What are they? And I sort of walked over to these markings, and literally there was this heat coming up. I was like, what are they? Anyway, I looked around, it was quite a big sort of like lawn area, and there was all these markings. And then I was like, oh my God, they're the signs of the zodiac. These beings, or whoever they are, have literally burned the sign of Virgo. There's Aries, there's Leo, there's Scorpio. I was like, oh my God. So I'd seen this incredible manifestation. Now, it just so happened, the next day I was at a party that was held by a chap called David Shayler. Has anybody heard of David Shayler?
Well, we should.
Okay.
Amazing.
Well, he's gone through a lot of hard times since that time. Won't go into all that now, but David Shayler was the chap that basically he worked for the MI5, and he'd come out and he'd spoken out about some of the things, the nefarious things that the secret services were getting up to, and because of that, he went across. he broke the Official Secrets Act or whatever, and so he was at loggerheads with the authorities. So he had a party with lots of journalists and people like that. So I was invited to this party, and I was there. It was quite nice. It was in Marylebone, actually, not far from where I live now, actually, interestingly. And it was a nice vibe there. And then I started to chat to this guy, and I was saying, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, you know, I'm a journalist. I'm a healer. I do various things." And he said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I work for the Ministry of Defence, and my job is to look at the skies and give them reports about UFOs." I was like, "Really? What's your name?" "My name is Tim Pope." I thought, "Pleased to meet you."
Nick Pope.
Nick Pope. And I said, "Well, it's really bizarre that I should meet you today." And then I explained to him what happened just the day before. And I said, "Nick, you know, what you know?" He said, "Well, Simon," he goes, "You know, I'm going to be honest." He said, you know, I wear the official hat and everything, but he said, when you take away, you know, Chinese lanterns, satellites, people off their head on drugs, and a few other little things that can be, there's a 20% hardcore left of all those sightings, which we simply cannot explain by traditional means." He said, "I've come to the opinion that there are beings out there that have the technology to enter our dimensions and to travel through space and time, whether it's wormholes or whatever." So I was like, wow, that's really, really interesting. Thank you for that. So the next week I went back to the place in Reading and stayed there for a couple more days to do a little bit more healing work. And when I was there, something really quite extraordinary happened that I will never forget. And it leads me, it's part of the story that leads me to this work here and what I do today to help people. I was sitting down, and Susie Anthony was there. There was about 4 other people there, and suddenly this being came through her. Okay, and this being she called Sanat Kumara. Now, Sanat Kumara is traditionally the head of the Great White Brotherhood, and this being came through her and started to speak to me, and it was the most incredible experience, the most incredible and beautiful experience, I have to say. And then I won't go into it all, but gave me information about a couple of my past lives and why I'm here and what I'm doing. She literally raised her hand and light beams poured out of her hand. Now, I see astral, I can see auras and the rest of it, but these were literally like beams of light, like laser beams, and everybody in the room could see. I was like, oh my God. And I said, please, I want more, I want more, I want more. She went, I want more rays, I want more rays, come on, more healing rays, more. So Sanat Kumara gave me over 100 healing rays at that stage. And I was already a Reiki master teacher at that time. I'd already had my own healing clinic in 2001, so I got some experience. I had like 10 years plus experience studying the esoteric. So I understood a lot of the principles. I could see auras, I was clairvoyant, and all these kinds of things. But this lifted my soul and body in a way that was just inexplicable. And from that moment on, my healing powers, or the healing powers I've been bequeathed, were on a totally different level. It was extraordinary. I literally could touch people and they would get better and things like that. But still I sort of resisted, because I didn't think I could make enough money being healed. I still resisted. So I went on and became a property developer and built houses.
With Danny Lamb? With Danny Lamb?
Yeah, for Danny Lamb. I did lots of other things. But I was always known as somebody who could do the magic. So people would sometimes fly me out to different countries, and if there was a problem, then I'd fly out and go to a retreat, or somebody would ask me to help them if they could afford me for a few days, pay my fare and the rest of it. So I would still do that. And I taught lots of people. I always had students through all those years in which I trained to do Reiki. And then basically what happened is in 2008 I bought this land, built 10 big houses on it, and then basically the recession happened, and the way the whole system is set up, I take full responsibility for what I didn't do. I lived a really great life, I've got some wonderful children, I'm very, very happy, but I went through a personal hell. And that personal hell got me back on the healing path in a more complete way. Okay, the personal hell, I had the big house in the country, the swimming pool, kids at private school, 5-6 holidays a year, living the life that I created with my partner, and it was all wonderful, happy, gorgeous, marvellous, or most of it was anyway. The recession hit, and it hit us bad. So eventually I lost everything financially. But what I gained was far more than the temporal things that I lost. And I was basically, I had to leave the home, and I split up with a partner, and I ended up in, the second time I had to leave was in 2012 actually, that magical date, and I ended up staying with somebody in Richmond who I hardly knew, in a sort of desperate situation with no money. I'd set up something called Light Therapy Revolution at a clinic in Covent Garden. I'd taken on a lease rather than mad with no clients at all. How the hell did I do that? And literally I had no money left. I was absolutely brassic. And I never forget, because my friend Andy, I didn't even know him very well at the time, was at John Lewis, and I remember him coming up and he putting two £50 notes and giving it to me, and I burst out crying my eyes out. I just couldn't believe it, because 100 quid then suddenly became so much money. This is somebody who lived really a great life financially, but 100 quid when you haven't got it is just, I mean, those £50 notes, you know, I could see people nodding in the audience. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do, because I had no clients, and everything was absolutely flat on the floor. But anyway, I tried for another few weeks at the clinic, nothing would work. No one came in, or maybe one or two people, and I thought, I can't even afford to pay the rent here. In fact, I was behind on the rent. The guy didn't even notice. Somebody let me go. So I remember walking down to the river at Richmond and saying, you know, please.
No,
I wasn't going to do it. I just thought, what am I going to do? I don't know what I wouldn't do that, because I've got beautiful children. They weren't living with me anymore. I was separated from my family. I had no money at all. And I was just thinking, this is just crazy. How am I at this late in my life? Then I was like 48 years old. How on earth does it come to this? And then I got the message, just keep going. Just keep going. So I kept going, and somebody asked me to do a stall for them at the show. And then I remember going to the stall, and literally people came to the stall, and I was touching them, and suddenly they were becoming healed. Literally, they were like getting better. And the next morning, I got like 3 or 4 messages, and literally in that week, I got £3,000 worth of business from nowhere. 3 grand. I was absolutely skinned, getted up to my eyeballs. That 3,000 was just like a gateway into a new world. It just enabled me to operate, and I was, oh my God, so filled with gratitude, I cannot tell you. So that was the new world, and then from that, I started to get very, very busy at my clinic in Covent Garden. And in February 2013, something extraordinary happened. So I go in there every day. I'm still living in Richmond. I go in there every day, and I'll be busy pretty much from morning till night. It was really packed. And then basically what happened is I started to notice it really, really freezing cold in the mornings and in the evenings. It was like there was no reason for the actual coldness. And this went on for about 5 or 6 days. And then I got back, and the woman I was staying with, a woman called Jo Ward, she said to me, Simon, I've got a message for you. She was a bit of a shame at the time. She said, they've been doing some excavations at a church in Kingston, and they've dug up some lead burial tombs, and I really feel that you need to go down there. I said, Jo, I'm so busy. What am I going to go to a church in Kingston for? No, please, son, you've got to go down there. The only people who are buried in lead burial tombs are the Knights Templars. You must go down. Now, I knew, in one of my previous incarnations, I've been a Knights Templar. It's one of those things I just knew. So I said, okay, I'm going to go down there. So I went down to this church, big church in Kingston. And I walked in, and literally some of the ley lines were broken. Literally, I go asthmatic if I walk over a broken ley line, literally instantaneously. So I started to do some energy clearing in the church and clear it out. And then literally I had a download from the invisible master. It was a positive one. Literally bang, 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 bang. I was like, fuck. What the hell's going on? Literally, I was literally electrified. It was like an electric feeling. I thought, what the hell is this? So I got back home, or back to Richmond, and I never forget this. And Jo was sitting down in the living room, and I walked past her in the kitchen, and then suddenly the temperature literally dropped like 10 degrees. And she goes, oh my God, it's become like a freezer. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, I do not know what's going on. So I did something that I never normally do. I went into trance mediumship. I decided I wanted to find out what was going on. I'm not a trance medium, it's not something I do. But I went into trance mediumship, and I cannot remember anything about what happened next. But fortunately, Jo did take me. And two angelic beings came in and they said to me, they said, Simon, we're gonna throw one on the black with you. You know, you are a bit sort of emotional, you're a loose cannon, you know, you can be a bit tricky, but we're just gonna try it with you because we find it very difficult to communicate with humans because the gap in the vibration in the average human is so vast. But you do have this ability to enter what they described as hyper-rapport. Hyper-rapport. And they said, there's a job we've got for you. We've got a job for you. And that job is to clean the timelines. To clean the timelines. Now, when I listened back, when I came out of this trance, like 30 minutes, I honestly couldn't remember anything. When I listened back, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. To clean the timelines. What does it mean? At that moment, I didn't understand it. But the next day, the cathars started to pour into my clinic, which at that time was in Covent Garden still. And the cathars were a group of Gnostics who basically carried some of the original teachings of the Christ. Because what happened, I won't go into all the history because my good friend here has done a lot of it, but I will just summarise. In the 3rd century, the growth of Gnostic Christianity became a big problem for the Roman Empire. So the bishops of Nicaea went to Constantine, subsequently called Constantine the Great, and they said, look, you know, we need a political solution to this problem. And this is what we think we're going to do. We're going to nationalise all religion. We're going to put it all under one umbrella. We're going to close it, not open it. We're going to close the religion. And we're going to run it and manage it. And so what they did was they then edited the New Testament and parts of the Old Testament too. They edited it and they created a new religion, which is what the Catholic Church was based upon. Which is one of the reasons that the Catholic Church has lots of pagan doctrines or pagan
Council of Nicaea 328.
Council of Nicaea 328, correct. So that was the basis of the Roman Catholic Church, and that carried on. However, some of those original Gnostics didn't like the way the Bible had been edited. And if you don't believe me, there's something called the Illuminati text. You can go online and read about it. They found some of the original Coptic manuscripts pre-328, which show where the Bible was edited. The Book of Thomas, for example, and other Gnostic texts, which are very beautiful texts, which were taken out, which talk about things like reincarnation, for example. All of those things were taken out of that New Testament. The Gnostic tradition, however, did continue, and it continued underground. That's where the word occult comes from. It means hidden. I know it's often used in a negative terminology. Information is power. Power can be used positively to empower people.
Even Gnosticism, there was some levels of Gnosticism that went, you know, coming from the Uffici that kind of went to the dark side.
Absolutely.
And even Crowley took Gnosticism to the dark side,
yes,
in a way if you want.
Yeah.
But Gnosticism is being criticized. Imagine, even last May, the Vatican felt obliged with Pope Francis to write whole pages against the Gnostics in his new encyclica. I mean, we are in 2018, last year 18, and the Pope, instead of talking about his own problems, which are many, he talks about the Gnostics. So that was pretty shocking.
It was shocking, it was amazing. But gnosis, the word gnosis means illuminated knowledge or illuminated information. So it's different from data. Data is what we might have on this. Okay? That's what data is. But it's how we use the data means whether it actually works and actually empowers us, or whether it is simply the recording of information. So illuminated information, or gnosis, it has a power beyond the words. The words contain the energetic ability to shift reality. Okay? And so the Gnostic tradition of Mary Magdalene and the Christ, okay, whether you believe that Christ died on the cross, which I don't happen to believe, whether he was a prophet, which I do happen to believe, whether he's an important prophet, which I do happen to believe, along with other great prophets like Elijah, Ezekiel, Muhammad, and the Buddha, Prince Gautama. All of these men, and sometimes women, would carry information beyond the immediate, and all of them, from my experience.
Because they were in contact with very important force, the genuine invisible masters who wanted to give an input to humanity, because in a way they all gave an input to humanity. The problem is that after the humans tend to make out of religion an institution that has nothing to do with the original founders. That's always happened.
Yes, and they've shown me now the reasons for that. So there's a couple of things, just a couple of principles. I hope I'm not bogging you down with too much story. but there's a couple of principles that have come through. So I'll just quickly summarise what happened subsequently. What happened next, even with all my historic esoteric background and crazy life that I've had, I never could have anticipated what happened. Basically, within 6 weeks of that visitation, I was given another 1,000 rays, and I was shown the nature of how the light body, the 144 light body, was constructed. They showed me the exact nature of the Fibonacci series and the connection with the velocity of light to the light body. And from that, I put it into practice, and the results I got were just unbelievable. From that, over the subsequent 6 years, I've been able to create something called the harmonic resonance healing system, which is based around the principle of katharos, or openness. Openness is the key. Now, I know there's lots of different traditions, there's lots of different people who are talking about stuff. There is a very simple litmus test. I believe in the flow. Okay, I teach people, show people how they can live a life in the flow. Now, the word flow, there's a goddess in the Greek pantheon called Cybele, and there's a goddess that, of course, the Romans love to nick everything. The Roman version is called Rhea. Okay, the goddess Rhea. Now, the goddess Rhea is the goddess of, it's actually called cosmic discharge. Okay, the idea that the universe that we're living in is a living, breathing entity that is constantly releasing things, drawing things back, and us as human beings, and the point you made earlier was brilliant about the Earth, I have to say, because the work that I do is very, very much to do with, I do a lot of geomancy, a lot of stuff with the Earth. The way our light bodies are in continual symbiosis or vibrational alignment with the planet, for good or not. So by blocking the ley lines of the planet, they blocked our light bodies. And conversely, by blocking our own light bodies, we block the planet. So when I go with a group of my healers in my magical group to a specific area, we clear the land. We do that by holding the frequency of love, high vibration, chanting a certain way, and acting during certain astrological, lunar, and solar alignments to facilitate the maximum optimum effects to purify the land. And in the process of purifying the land, we purify ourselves. Now, one of the biggest shocks for me, and I literally shouted at the top of my head when I was sitting upstairs in Richmond about a week after the angels visited me on the 21st of February 2013. By the way, I should mention, the next day the Pope resigned. The next day the Pope resigned. Ratzinger resigned the next day. So I took that as a sort of an auspicious sign. I looked up the word cathar. Okay, because these cathar stars are pouring into my clinic. These beautiful people that I suddenly thought, they've been cursed. These people have had a curse put upon them. And I started to read a little. I heard about the cathars, I didn't know that much about them. The word cathar etymologically comes from the word katharos. The word that I'd been given 20 years earlier, or 15 years earlier, in 1998, when I discovered a word for open. Cathar means pure and open. Pure and open. So the work that I do helps people to purify their light body, to release the coagulated dissonance of fear, of pain, of trouble, of trauma. Where we've broken someone else's flow, we've all done it, let's be honest. Where people have broken our flow, or where ancestrally our flow has been subjugated and broken, where we've been persecuted and all this stuff. And I called this, in fact they showed me it, they told me the name of this thing, the subjugation against our natural way of being. They told me it was called the curse of Rome. The curse of Rome. Subjugation, exploitation, domination, persecution and tyranny against us. So the work that I do is about liberating people from that. So when I talk to my children, I never tell them this is what you've got to do or that's what you've got to do. I never do that. I share with them my experience. I encourage them to be open and to formulate their own opinions. And if they agree with me, great. If they don't, well, that's fine too. Because that's how we all learn. I'm changing. I probably will be very different in 10 years' time. I'll have evolved in different ways, and I hope you guys will too. But open is the key code that I transmit from these angelic beings to open us from the limitations of the subjugation, which we all know permeates the pharmaceutical industry, permeates religion, permeates the political system, permeates the banking system, permeates the way we operate, the marketing, the advertising, what the things that they tell you are going to make you happy, permeates the way we eat food and the way we cultivate food. It's endemic and it's omniscient, unfortunately. But, and this is what I want to encourage you all here, they showed me a gateway out of it. We don't have to be in fear. All of us have the personal power to transcend the fears around artificial intelligence, the fears around political imposition, and all the fears around disease and sickness. I don't get sick anymore. I decided I wasn't going to get sick anymore. And guess what? I don't get sick anymore. Why? Because I work with energy in a positive way. For me, the litmus test is, if people are sharing esoteric stuff with you, are they coming from a good place? Are they codependent? Do they want to rescue you? Do they want to, like, have your money for eternity? Yes, I charge my services, of course I do. I give lots free as well. People want to pay me, fine, we have to live, that's okay. But it's all about the nature of the dynamic that we have with the people around us. So that's why I'm a libertarian. I believe in freedom of the human being. I actually believe in the human being. I don't believe in communism. I don't believe in a communist system. I just don't think it works. I don't believe in socialist imposition. I don't believe in fascism. I don't believe in systems that take away our power. I believe if we are open-hearted, we should naturally want to help our fellow man. I love giving things to people. I love being philanthropic. I'm not perfect. But I feel that's a natural human way of being, to share our resources in love. But unfortunately, we've been so misprogrammed into scarcity mindset, we've been so misprogrammed into greed and control and manipulation, that it's hard for people to step outside that. But, and this is the big but, the world is changing. The world is awakening. I personally believe, that there are great positive beings that guide us. I can explain stories of negative things that happened to me. In 2000, I was in Marbella. I opened a portal out there when I was writing a game, and I had two greys come to me from Zeta Reticuli of a lower vibration, and they tried to get me to work with them, and I refused. Believe that or not, it's up to you. It did really happen though. I've also had higher vibrational beings from Zeta Reticuli who brought me incredible knowledge and information and intelligence from their star system and said to me, we just want to help you, Simon, because we don't want what happened to our star system to happen to Earth, where the greedy manipulators took over. We're some of the few that actually got through, and they've shared their, honestly, they're so intelligent, it's unbelievable. The level of intelligence is just phenomenal. And I have those kind of discussions with some of those high vibrational beings quite regularly. At the end of the day, I just look, I just want to be healthy, I want to be happy, I want to transmit health and happiness and openness to others. And that's really the nature of what I do. So basically, the harmonic resonance healing system is not only is it very practical, it's also very scientific. So they showed me with very, very clear detail the nature of the light body and the different codes which we can do. And I want to share one other thing with you before I go, because this is a very, very important thing, I think, for all of us in different ways. You talked about being a magician, and I'm a magician. Magic is just energy pertaining to change, okay? Now, we often talk about this thing here called the iPhone or the Samsung or the smartphone or whatever it is, okay? Now, the human being is the same. We are like an iPhone in as much as you push the button Siri, call 07968259761, you get Simon Hinton's number, right? In the same way, we can also call in what we need. We have the capability as transmitter-receptor systems to call in what we need. So we can call in the exact frequency of what we need. Okay, and the more, it's a sort of it's a paradox, because the more open we are, the more activated we are, the more powerfully we can call in a ray to solve a problem with a tumour that's cancerous, or to solve or clear IBS, or to release someone from diverticulitis, or to clear and purify our emotional bodies. All of us have that capability, but all of us have been closed, shut down to greater and lesser extent, until sometimes, like you, Jason, you had a suddenly awakening, right? Suddenly you overdid this. When you told that story, when you shared that story about your finger, I've seen those kind of stories. I've seen tumours disappear in days. I've seen people recover. I've had clients who've about to have their leg chopped off, and 6 months later they're running around. I've seen this so many times. I know it to be true. That's why I'm so passionate about it. All of us here have the potential to step outside the limitations of all the nonsense. And let me tell you something. If you believe in the deep state, if you believe in the Illuminati, if you believe in the dark side of things, and those people do exist, let's be honest, that's why the world is so toxic. If you do believe in those things, know this also, they are running scared, my friends. They're running scared of people like you and me, who are actually thinking outside the box, who are not going to accept that actually that's the way it's got to be. That there are questioning minds, and the more that we gather together, and the more that we just hold the power of love and expansion, then a critical mass point will be reached. A critical mass, and believe me, it's a scientific tipping point. Okay, critical mass point is something in a system when it hits a certain level. This is mathematical. Then the system starts to change. The system, and as you said at the beginning, Sasha, only a few little people need to change the world. A few of us, focused with true intentionality, are enough to shift the whole dynamic. Just like a rudder on a massive ship, you only turn it 1 degree and the ship goes to a different place. It really is that simple principle. So I know we hear a lot about the dark stuff, and it is important to recognise and not to delude ourselves. But I want to share with you some of the light stuff. We all have personal power. We all have the ability to change our reality, to transcend sickness, suffering, disease, and emotional dissonance. All of us do. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. We all bleed red, and we can all go upstairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon, because I quote the speakers today, really exceptional, and they make me really proud of this presentation. That was more of an international conference dedicated to subjects which were discussed in a way that didn't have any, there's no personal interest here. It's just wanting to give, you know, and the fact that we are giving without really wanting anything in a sense, we just wanting to give out this information, I think is very positive, and it makes me proud that it's connected to this book, which I've worked a lot, because a lot of the experiences of Simon were also my experience. I mean, I was in the music business with some of his friends in the 90s, we come all from similar backgrounds, with that, with drugs, sex and rock and roll, and we had it all, and then we lost it also, you know, the moment in which maybe, you know, 100 pounds, great stuff, or I had to go and sell my sampler, I couldn't get there to the airport to go and get there. I mean, I think that every human being really gets to become special because he's trialed, because he's living certain experience. My father entitled one of his books Experience, which is really people living an experience. We are all living an experience, but some of them live a more painful experience, but that pain then becomes something that, of course, then is a strength. And also the fact that these invisible masters are around us. They can be negative, they can be positive, but they exist, and they can, you know, if we are psychically attacked by a bunch of demons, I have to go and have more than an exorcism. And in fact, the subject of my next book will be that. I tell you, it's pretty heavy, and it was pretty heavy for me to even write it. And my wife can confirm that, because
Can I share something on that?
Yes.
Okay, 3 things. A golden dome protection around, just say it. Golden dome protection around you, a platinum dome protection around you, and the really, really super robust one. Imagine and just say a diamond dome of protection around you, filled with impenetrable fire. And believe me, hold that vibration, and you find that the psychic attack dissipates. Diamond dome of protection.
Yeah.
Diamond dome of protection.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
I had to put one around this room earlier because I noticed the vibration dropped on stage, so I was protecting the work and the people in here.
No, I mean, well, I mean, there is some energy, you know, the lady had a moment, you know, about the thing, and I tend to say, we are not any anti-this or anti-that.
It's a big part of later.
Yeah, no, but I'm sure, but that's why, you know, because at one point, you know, the discussion, you know, was very important what Sasha was saying, and so we needed to keep on with that, you know, but there was some attempt to interfere, you know, in a way, but not her, nothing to do with you. But the thing is that we are all subject to these entities, and they can come into your body very easily. I'm not to tell you that because I'm also an exorcist. I have done exorcism in places, but it's something that I don't really talk about a lot. But the last exorcism I did was in 2014. I was called in the middle of the night in this hospital where there was this black immigrant from Africa who was the victim of a witch doctor. The doctors couldn't do anything. The local monks from Santa Scholastica, which is a very important monastery, the first monastery of its kind, as you know, for the Benedictine monks, so they are the best exorcists, and definitely not better than them. But the fact that I had a relic of, an important relic with me of Padre Pio, gave me the possibility to release that, you know, and it was just a prayer and releasing that thing, and everything was fine. In this case also, in the conspiracy community, we call it conspiracy community. Nowadays it's laughable.
Or the truth community.
Yeah, nowadays it's laughable to call it conspiracy, but they used to call it conspiracy, because then now the conspiracy has manifested on mankind, so we can't really call it conspiracy anymore. In the truth community, there is always the fact, you believe this or that is heading the plot. When instead is a series of circumstances that come together and a series of people from different traditions that, of course, betray their own people, betray their own religion. And it's not, you know, that all people of that kind are like this. But unfortunately, there is always people that accept that easy, like when you said the Zeta Reticuli graves coming through and off each other. Some people are weak. They accept. Most people are weak and accept the offers of the dark side. And at that point, of course, you are compromising also your whole existence and the existence of the people around you that maybe believe up until then that you are a good person. Because there is also a big problem here. We are facing an age in which there is a lot of false prophets. The first one is Pope Francis. He's the head of all false prophets because, I mean, he's a guy who is basically preaching an image, but notice this, and I know that from people who are very close to it. The moment cameras goes down, and sometimes some photographers manage to catch that glimpse in which he's really Pope Francis, well, then you see, this guy is perfectly possessed. No, perfectly possessed. Perfect possession can come from an angelic being, and then you emanate knowledge for the rest of your lifetime. But instead, perfectly possessed by a demonic entity of a negative nature means that you are basically enacting what this demon is telling you to do. And you can really see it on Pope Francis, especially when he's saying something that is blatantly a lie, with nonchalance and preaching, from on top of there, that you have to welcome all the immigrants and destroy all the walls, and you have the biggest walls and he doesn't welcome one immigrant in the right. I mean, hypocrisy is really the evil of this age, unfortunately. So in my work, I tend to despise hypocrisy, despise falsity. I have not done this job of publishing books because I want to make money out of it, of things. Because what happened in my life was simply, I was persecuted. At one point in 2006, I decided to go online and make a blog. The next thing I knew, they wanted to take my son, they came into my house and threatened me, the secret police of Norway, PST, and they persecuted me. They arrested me for espionage in Norway. They should be ashamed of themselves in that country. I have many Norwegian friends even here tonight, and they're ashamed for their country and the way they treated me. A country that gives the Nobel Peace Prize to a warmonger like Obama.
Oh, please, it's the gateway of human trafficking.
It's the worst hypocrisy. In the old days, it used to be the place where the Soviet spy used to meet with the spy from the West to make some shady deals. But and then officially they're all, So, I mean, for me, I have suffered a lot of persecution in the last few years, but also I understood that by giving this information, I was like making it more difficult for the people who were persecuting me to lock me up, to deem me as insane, to persecute me in the ways they did, which was very bad, because I went subject to things which are stuff of horror movies. In Norway, they put me on a thing that was like a table, like this. You put they locked me, ta-ta, like this, ta-ta, and I was facing a coven of witches headed by a black magician called Dr. Nikolai Frisco. And these people in the daytime were doctors, in the nighttime they used to make voodoo rituals. And the guy was a babalao, sacrificing animals and blood and stuff, and crazy stuff. I mean, I saw stuff out of horror movies that people, oh, okay, but this is Zagami having another of his rants. No, it's not that way. The fact is that people are scared of the truth. So now, with all these books I made, I thought, okay, you want to challenge me? Challenge my books. They have footnotes, they have references, credible ones. I don't go for conspiracy theories, I go for hard facts. So it's very difficult then to be able to challenge me. If you want to challenge me, you challenge me intellectually. You don't challenge me by locking me up. Because every time they did that, and every time they persecuted me, I came out strong. Because like in your experience, you know, when you are in the difficult, then you come out, you are strong enough. Of course, a certain dose of anger you can have, but I tell you one thing, every night I go to bed very tranquil, very relaxed. Why? Because I don't give a fuck. I saw everything, you know. I mean, okay, they have my child since 2007. I haven't seen my child. I have never seen him growing. I don't know even how his voice. I never talked. I don't know how his voice sounds like. This is the new world order, and he's in the hands of a bunch of people who are enemies. But real enemies, who work for the Clinton Foundation, for the CIA, for Fethullah Gulen, who is trying to make a coup in Turkey. These are people, are criminals. Of course, guys, if you ask me, I would send a bunch of Sicilians and whack them. But this is not, unfortunately, we are in the year 2019 now. We have to be all proper, nice, and so, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I deal...
No, you don't need somebody who needs
absolutely,
you don't see your child grow up.
I was going to say something about I deal with a lot of people who've had child abuse. I deal with a lot of people with child abuse and sexual crimes and things. I deal with a lot, unfortunately, I deal with a lot of, but say unfortunately, fortunately, because I can help clear the trauma. But what I've just something I've noticed, anyone who'd want to hurt a child, anyone who'd want to do something like that, I personally just do not believe it's human. I do not believe those actions are the actions of a human. I mean, just because I've met a lot of people in my life, in every different facet of life, honestly, from governments to gangsters to... most people are actually all right. Most people, when you get them in a small... Most people are actually good. You do get the odd sociopath and psychopath. Hey, but generally speaking, most of the vast majority of people are actually... When it comes down to it, actually decent people, okay, so when people do those kind of things, I just think it's not actually human, it's not a human trait. Something happens to them when they become possessed, or they're deeply mentally, I just feel that the Charles Mansons of the world, that those people are possessed by evil forces, and for whatever reason, that's my take on it. And if we can think of that principle, then we can also look at some of the psychopaths who run our government, because I think also they're also possessed by evil forces. I just feel that not everybody is bad, not every person who runs a government or the Prime Minister or President is a bad person. But there is a disproportionately high number, and I wonder why that is the case. And I feel it's because there are these other forces out there who want to take advantage of us, and they have other agendas which are not the Christ agenda. And when I say Christ, I know some people are Jewish in here, we can call it Tiferet. The idea of Christ is a conscience. Christos, Christoline, Krishna, Tiferet if you're a Kabbalist or a Jewish. It's the idea of the connection through the heart, because all of us have the potential.
Well, paid off on the way of the heart.
The way of the heart. Yeah. We all have the potential to reflect divine divine energy. We all have the agenda. And for me, the idea of the Christ, whether you believe it as a historic personage or not, is the idea that a human being can become a divine being. A human being can become a divine being. Because we all have the potential to open up and become that. And that's the work that I do. And I encourage people to believe that and know that we can all be divine on this planet.
Well, it's important to understand we can be divine, but there is also a problem in wanting to become gods, like the way, because then you want to act as God, and then you become the guy who decides, okay, I'm going to have my child like this, I'm going to design him like that, I want his nose like that, then you're starting to play God.
If you think about Jesus,
unfortunately, people misunderstand what you're saying.
When you think about Jesus, he washed the feet of his disciples. So I think if you look at the great prophets, they were known for their humility. Actually, the real prophets are known for their humility. Christ washed the feet of his disciples, as far as the story goes, we believe it or not, but the idea that the greatest of masters are the greatest servants. It's about service, it's not about ego and control and manipulation.
Just very quickly, I love what you're saying, it's fantastic, thank you so much. What we've done is we've handed our power over so much, or being disempowered, if you like. It's a masochistic, sadistic symbiosis, in my opinion. We hand them our power and they rob it from us, right? But the time of worshipping popes, politicians, priests and presidents is over, right? Because in a way we're so disempowered.
Because they're all like characters in a play that sounds like a little bit old enough.
And we feel so disempowered.
When you see the Pope dressed up like that with all those, even the Arab guys the other day, one friend of mine said, is he dressed up to go to a wedding, go white, and we are giving importance to these people. We are giving it's an illusion.
It's like, we're so disempowered, we're looking for a mummy and daddy to tell us what to do. So we're giving it back. But I mean, I love what Simon's saying, because getting that power back.
Or the Queen going around with the golden carriage and all her things and it's a show that
it's very, very easy to conduct an orchestra if you're a psychopath, if that orchestra as humanity is very imbalanced and out of sync and out of concert pitch. What Simon's talking about is taking back our power, reharmonising ourselves individually, and once the orchestra of humanity is in concert pitch again, the psychopaths can wave their stick on the stage as much as they want and we can't be controlled. So the urgency for me is taking back that balance and power as humanity, and then we won't hand it over to them again and again and again to the next psychopath who promises, we're looking for a God. It's here. It's us.
Love begins at home. So, I just do little things every day, everybody. I just like smile at the people in the shop, smile at the people who are serving you, be nice to cleaners, be nice to the people that make the world go round. Just be nice, be a good person. Just in those little ways, you'll be amazed at how the reverberations of your loving nature will reverberate way beyond anything that you may be able to see. And if everybody did that, we do it sort of on Christmas Day or certain days, and everyone goes, oh, we should be like that every day. Why can't it be like that every day? It can be like that every day. It can be like that every day.
Absolutely. But I think that the invisible mass that we have discussed today, the subject of somebody behind, is behind the scenes, or in the invisible world, directing the secret chiefs, the invisible masters are directing this humanity. They're directing this humanity and putting us through trials. No? This is going to be our biggest trial, because if you have to follow the book of Revelation, this is the biggest trial of all times. I mean, this is the moment in which we have to face China, the dragon, the mark of the beast, the holy show all together, and it's here and now. So it's not tomorrow, the day after. So you can't really ignore the fact that we are living a turning point in history.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, it's
absolutely
a turning point in history where, of course, we were talking here with our magical friend here from Africa, who's been talking about in the break, very interesting things. And one thing is that we're going to have, unfortunately, some side effects out of all this, no? Some unprecedented killings on a massive scale, people dying of diseases. We're going to have, unfortunately, a lot of people dying as a side effect of all this. But in the end, we're going to come out with a new plant. New seed is being planted now that will grow up, that we're trying to plant with people like Sasha, with this project, Jason, and me, you. we are trying all to plant some seeds that will grow in the future.
Leo, I'd like to speak about planting seeds briefly, because I didn't get a chance to speak about the Judicial Commission of Inquiry that the International Tribunal of Natural Justice has seated and is ongoing. It'll continue for a few months yet. But that Judicial Commission of Inquiry into human trafficking and child sex abuse is vital. And the reason why we began it was because we knew we needed to bring this subject matter onto the international table and the multilateral table and force it into the face of the status quo. And we've effectively done that since the sittings in Westminster in April of last year.
It's an interesting point that Sasha makes though, that actually, and it's something that I talk about quite a bit, is the fact that we, certainly with my Harmonic Resonance, what I try and do is to show people that every problem has a dynamic. And to move beyond judgment. On one level, difficult things that happen to us and horrendous things that we hear about that happen to people, on one level seem totally unfair, but on another level they form part of a greater karmic play out, which is what I try to help people do. And karmic play out, karma just means basically when we've broken somebody else's flow, when someone's broken our flow significantly to impact our life body, or ancestrally our flow has been impacted or subjugated. That has to play out in some form or other. Sometimes it plays out in very cruel ways. Sometimes, with the work that I do, I try to help people clear it as seamlessly as possible. So, by understanding that we're not victims, even though we may have suffered, it changes the whole mentality, it changes the way we can operate in the world, so that we can come out not as victims but as victors.
Yes.
And that is a very important distinction, because Christ was a victim. These other people, they don't think of them as victims. Well, I certainly don't.
They're heroes.
They're heroes. So, we all have the ability to do that. It does hurt us when it hurts me anyway, hearing about people being injured.
It's obvious.
But there's also, I know it can be cleared.
Listen,
I know the trauma can be cleared.
When I was in Mass and a priest came and put his hand under my trouser to feel my butt when I was 12 or 11 years old, of course I was pissed off. but that also made me understand that the whole thing was a show. And so I, at that point, said, okay, this is a show, let me see how it works. And then, I didn't let it go. I just said, fine, and then I started. And I was the first one in 2006 to start saying these people were in the valley were doing those pigs, and that cost me a lot.
Oh yeah.
Because I remember my father, a week before he died, even my father in 2010, so not that long ago, still in 2010, it wasn't like now that people finally understand that the valley is a whole bunch of pedophilia. Now everybody knows, because it's been in the mainstream media, it's the mainstream media.
Yeah.
But 1 week before my father died, he was working with me and said, Leo, why are you saying these things? You're saying too much, Ratzinger, this is louder, gay, maybe you should just, it's a bit too much. And I said, I'm your father. Sorry guys, but my father was there. He would have died after a week, but I said, sorry, but it doesn't work. I said, this is my mission. I'm going to continue. So, it's...
His Grace Bishop Ria Abuela Salah Jerusalem is one of our commissioners. When I first met him, which was about 10 years ago, at a dinner party, I asked the hostess if I could sit next to him, and she said, yes, Stone, but don't you dare start your nonsense with him. And she put me next to him, and I started my nonsense with him. I was delighted to get close to him, and I started, and he was offended. He was not happy at this dinner party with what I was telling him. And at the end of the dinner party, I put my card in his purple frock and said, Your Grace, forgive me for ruining your dinner. Well, he called me a few weeks later and said, I'm coming to England, and I'll be staying with
That's a miracle. That's what I got to see.
Right, but he said, come and pick me up. Who was the head of the English?
I don't remember his name. But people have asked the
Lambeth Palace. Yeah. So he's staying in Lambeth Palace with the honcho. He said, you could pick me up and we can have tea. And I did. And we spent an hour or two together. And he just said, tell me what you need to tell me. So he was interested after we had that conversation. And that was a man at that time, he was in his mid-70s or early 70s, a bishop of Jerusalem. But he'd heard enough things that I planted in that dinner to be interested in hearing the
I saw him, he was very interesting.
Yes, and then 6 months later he phoned me one night from Nazareth and he said, Sasha, the devil is in the church.
Well,
And he said, I'm coming to London. We then spent 2 or 3 days together. And subsequent to that, he's now a commissioner with the Judicial Commission and on the front line with our Chief Justice and other heavyweight commissioners fighting the devil from within. But that's the point I'm trying to make. A lot of these good, powerful
it's
people.
like Father Malachi Martin. He was persecuted for saying the truth. Because
My point being, Bishop Rea was in the church for 40 to 50 years without knowing about what was going on in the basement.
But maybe you
So
prefer not to.
Chief wants to say something.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but it's interesting all what we're witnessing tonight. But where I come from, we say a young man runs fast, but the older man knows the way.
Very good.
So,
Well, I know the way that now we have to.
Are you a young man or an old man?
the young man runs fast, but the older knows the way.
He knows the way.
But he wanted to make you a
The
young
young
older.
will run, but at the point he will stop. Well, if he sees the cross, he will stop. He doesn't know where to go, so he will stop. Then the older will reach him and say, okay, go this way. So the little elder, where I come from,
Ivory Coast.
yes, when they analyze the situation that we're living in, the simple thing they say, it's our fault. Because it's like when you show to your 5-year-old child how to manipulate your remote control for the TV, you lose your TV. You start playing around, he can even put it in water because he doesn't know the value of it. What you do, you don't take it away from him because he will cry. But you go, then switch off somewhere the TV, so it doesn't work anymore. He has the remote control, and it doesn't have any more value. So we'll drop it. That's what is happening. Those people that are controlling the society today were went to learn from Kemet. From Kemet. Africa. All this spirituality.
That's your tradition you're speaking
Yes.
about.
So Egyptian tradition.
Egyptian, yeah.
They were taught
Is the basis of chemistry, no?
Yeah.
Alchemy.
Kemet.
Ken.
Kemet.
The land of Ken.
Yes.
Alan,
So the little bit that they learn, they use it like a 5-year-old that is manipulating the remote control. So they said, okay, now it's too late. They are doing too much. Put it in an end to it. So 20 years ago, they told us that it was the end of this that is happening. So today, if we see that we're talking about it, then we're trying to find a solution, I am amazed. The little people in the bush, they knew it, then they put an end to it. Because we don't sacrifice human beings, children. We don't do those things. For us, a child is a future. We don't kill a child. We don't kill future. A woman is a blessed of the divine, because it's through woman that the future arrives. So we got 3 people in our communities that are very highly respected. First, a woman, she's a goddess. The child is the future. Then the elder that is going soon, the other side.
Back to the other side.
Those 3 in the community are protected. We don't kill them. We go to war to protect those. Because in a community without the elder, we don't have a knowledge. In a community, if we don't have children, we don't have a future. If we don't have women in the community, we don't have a reproduction. So those 3 are very important for us. We don't kill them. We don't do anything against them. We protect them. So when this society came to this level, where they don't know what is the valuable thing, they lost being humanity. Human being is something for us. Being a human being, you need qualities, you need vision, you need guidance, you need knowledge. Because a human being is part of a divine being. In our education, which is not the modern education, the initiation, from the age of 7, we start educating the children to know themselves, who they are, the divine being inside themselves. So they control themselves, they found the way in the balance of the cosmos, because we are in a cosmic order. It's like a puzzle where every human being plays a role. Everything living being plays a role. So for us, all those things, we have to know it before we get even the age of adult. From 7, because when you're born till 7, your protection is still in the hand of the divine. That's why sometimes when there is an accident, a car accident, if there is a child in, nothing happened to him, because his protection is still in the divine world. But after the age of 7, we take care of him. So he has to go through initiation. The initiation is to teach him the energy that he used to be before becoming a man. The energy that is in his small body. And where is it coming from? Why is he here? What is his journey becoming? So we will learn from that period of time why he is here. So if you know, you've been through initiation, that you know why you are there. If you didn't go through initiation, then you will be lost. You will go, you will completely be lost. So for us, I'm talking about Africa before colonization.
I was going to say, before the French came and imposed military bases all over your country.
That's the education that we were going through. So someone that has been through this education, he doesn't need police, he doesn't need anyone to tell him that you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't kill. You are educated. You got your police inside. You got all those qualities that tells you how to be a human being. That's why we didn't have any prison. We didn't have any police. You didn't have any military thing because you don't have to go to kill. You cannot kill a human being. You cannot kill a divine.
That is the police, that ethical alarm bell, which is intrinsically in us all, isn't it? That's covered over.
We don't put any divine being in a jail. Putting a human being in a jail, you putting a divine in a jail. When there was something in a community where things happen, then we have to judge someone that did something wrong. It wasn't himself, only him that we judged. We judged the whole community. We were saying, where did we get it wrong to produce this person? Where did we miss it up? Because this is not something that is happening in our community. We didn't teach him that he shouldn't do that. For us, he is a victim also. How do we do to correct this that is happening?
What is the answer? What is the correction?
This is our... so what we do, there is... Because for us, nothing happened as an accident. Everything that happened has a reason.
Bravo.
It has a reason.
Of course it did.
So we see the priest for an energy reading. What we don't know, what we don't understand, we seek the divine words to give us the meaning. For us, earth is got energy. The core of earth is like the master computer, as we could say, that communicate with the all worlds. We're talking about communication of energy. So earth that is in a space communicate with every single thing, with the sun, with the moon, with every other thing. So earth projects energy that we call Bayuali and receive energy from the other things that we call Yenu. It's like being in a room, a dark room. If you don't communicate, room, you will bump in each other. So there is a constant energy communication in the cosmos.
In the cosmos.
Everything communicates. That's how we know where, at which distance, the mass, how big or fast is running the moon or Sirius star or the thing. We dig from the earth energy. Then we have all the information from there.
You know, Chief, I can't help but think you must be such a crushing disappointment to the French government and the Jesuits. Because you haven't
the possibility to talk with him also on the break, and he's an exceptional guy. I would like to give him more space, but now we have
I won't be long, guys. Just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to give the possibility for the last 20 minutes, we have 20 minutes before the closing, for a question time. The moderator, Paul Fedeli, will conduct it. Anybody that wants to questions for us?
Just to follow on from what she said.
If you make question, please stand up and come close because we can't hear anything.
Just to follow on from what the chief said and something Sasha said earlier. I wanted to have a career in museums, but what I was interested in was colonialism. And I always came from the heart. And so the way that museums display colonialism say. You don't interpret the collections, you don't put the real story of what was happening.
Oh dear.
Maybe we're not friends in that interview.
I never got a job. Well, I was saved, I never got a job in the museum. But I did study museums, and I studied slavery displays. And one thing is that is why I think, from what you're talking about, using wisdom and to nurture the future and to, protect the women and the knowledge of the elderly, that is why they decimated Africa.
Yes.
Because they didn't want that to survive. And that is why they decimated. Because it took me a decade to understand it, coming from my mainstream education. That is why they went to all these different countries. They took the knowledge, which is probably in the Vatican, so they have the knowledge, but they're just, and it still exists in pockets, but they popularized it, so we get a populist version of what is going on in Africa. But it saddens me, that's why they decimate African culture, the languages, slavery, bringing them over here, not letting them speak the languages.
Thank you for your attention.
Sure.
Right. Do you guys know if we're close to disclosure on extraterrestrials? I mean, because that would move everything forward. It's a huge amount.
There's a lot of, I can speak partly to it, there's a lot of conjecture about this. I'm in direct contact with people who are deeply in the center ground of the intelligence community in North America, and to some extent in Europe as well. And the consensus of what I'm learning is that the short answer is yes. Is that certainly, I think 2023 is a seminal year. And it is my understanding that 2023 is going to be the signature year for disclosure. But having said that, in mainstream television today, you're seeing UFOs being shown on newscasts where they're saying, oh my God, last night over the beach we saw this. And all around the world, they're now doing what absolutely wasn't done 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. So there's already a kind of emergence of truth-saying amongst the idiot mainstream media. But that's really what it's going to come down to, is a sanction coming from the military-industrial complex, aka the power within government, to agree fully to. But that's also connected to the demolition of the Vatican, which, thank Christ, is underway. So
will that end religion then?
Well, it'll almost certainly end religiosity. But as Leo pointed out earlier, the primary agenda by the most nefarious aspects of the global invisible hand is to destroy all religions in their true mystical traditions and impose a one-world religion. So we have to be very, very mindful of what's going to be taking place. On the one hand, we want to see the complete auto-destruct of the Vatican.
What you're saying, Josh, is it fits in perfectly with what I've been writing actually in my new book. It's coming out at the end of the month. And that's why they didn't want any disclosure during Trump, especially because Trump doesn't want to disclose what's happening. It's all, if Hillary was in power, probably there would be actually more disclosure. And I will explain that in the book, but just to make a summary of that, the thing is this, there is an organization, a very powerful one, more powerful than Bilderberg and all that. It's based in Russia, in Moscow. It's an international institute. It's connected with the Jesuits. Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, went there not so long ago. Fuentes, who is the ex-astronomical advisor of the Jesuits before Costa Magno, went there. And the spokesman is called Pier Giorgio Bassi, who is the vice president of the Academy of the Illuminati in Rome. and there is people, it's depending directly from Putin. It has some very important people in this situation, but even the Kirill, the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church, says if they reveal this, it will automatically destroy the faith. So, but at the same time, there is a big problem here in the sense that Hillary, John Podesta, all those people, the Spirit Cook, you know, that they are all connected to this disclosure thing, because these are demons. I mean, what they want to disclose is demons. They're not UFO benign aliens. No, no, they are demonic aliens. And I talked about them also in Invisible Master, and they do exist. And of course, the Vatican is working with them, and this International Institute, imagine it's called International Institute, I think, for the fate of the world, no, for the future of the world. I mean, they gave themselves a pompous name, and there is really powerful people in it, and nobody knows anything about it. And John Podesta, right in the middle of the elections, went to Rome in a restaurant, a fish restaurant in the Parioli area, had a specific meeting about it, and all this is all interconnected also with then the persecution that we at InfoWars are having with these you know, with these people. But I can tell you that Trump prefers not to disclose anything, because if he discloses it, he's basically endorsing.
It opens up those floodgates, and that's the problem. And that spirit cooking, and all of the generational bloodletting, as I was talking about earlier, the articulated wars, billions of souls being ultimately harvested, all of that has been contributing towards anchoring the third density manifestation of these demonic realms. And it's very important to recognize that's why they've been promulgating war, disease, and poverty.
I mean, Trump is not doing it because it will go against him, but you know, if he...
I still don't quite understand that. Can you clarify?
It will be, I mean, it's so complicated. It's a bit complex. That's why
I can understand certain reasons why he wouldn't be believed, and therefore...
No, it's not about believing here. No, it's not
60 to 70% of people do believe in UFOs.
No, it's not about, but here you don't understand. Those people in Moscow, the International Institute of World Affairs in Moscow, they work with these aliens. They actually work with them.
I know that.
And the fact that they're working, and they're working against, like, for example, all this Russian collusion business is rubbish, because Hillary Clinton is the biggest Russian agent ever, and all those Democrats, they're all Soviet spies, they're all communists. They started with Kennedy going to Moscow. I mean, Kennedy, the other guy, the brother. But I mean, they're all left-wing communists, and they all side with the evil. That's why communists are atheists. So it's easy to plant in them the thing about the aliens being benign, being helpful. So I was there in the office of Pier Giorgio Bassi a few years back. I think it was, and I saw it with my own eyes what he's doing, because he was asking me help for certain contacts. And he's working with Roberto Pinotti, who works with Stephen Greer. He's all interconnected, and Stephen Greer is the biggest pawn and the biggest crook, and I have denounced him in my book.
Oh, the disclosure project.
Yeah, I've denounced him in my book.
He's a very strange person.
So just so you know, I mean, this book has some interesting topics.
He's not a publicly elected figure, so I won't be speaking about anyone who's, you know, in the public domain. I think we should tear down publicly elected figures. But,
well, publicly elected figures is Hillary Clinton and John Podesta.
Yes,
these two people, I mean, not because John Podesta has been elected, but because he's, of course, the advisor of Hillary, the campaign advisor. These figures are very important in this whole thing. And then there is Pier Giorgio, and it all links also with the uranium thing, the uranium scandal with Hillary. It all links, because when it comes also to nuclear power and uranium...
This is tearing the fabric of time-space. It's vital. But that's been going on since the late 30s and early 40s.
Of course. So if you have...
was Abraham.
And now
thank you for your question.
Thank you.
So it kind of gave us an input.
Does that not give you the answer you wanted?
Yeah, well, more.
2020, I think 2020.
Would you like disclosure? Would you like disclosure?
Oh yeah, I've been waiting for
do you think it would make any difference?
Yeah, I think it's going to be...
Well, I hate to disappoint you.
That's going to...
But if I make a disclosure...
Of course it will, but I hate to disappoint you. Don't be holding your breath for little blue bird-like aliens.
You know, if they disclose the truth, okay? okay? And then you are like, you fall into the propaganda trap, CNN made propaganda. You will basically, yeah, they are the saviors. Steven Spielberg and the movie. It's just absolutely. So, any other questions before we start?
I saw a really interesting documentary with a Russian defector. It's sort of recorded in 1983, something like that. And it was just absolutely fascinating. It said how to destroy America and how Russia was giving this image of everything being sort of idealistic. You know, they've shown nurseries which...
I mean, I tell you one thing, I have very much been a friend of the Russian government for many years and stuff. For one thing, because they respect that I don't give a damn. I went there when I was at Leozagami, as I'm Leozagami nowadays, and they treated me like really, I must say, like I was more than a rock star. I mean, I was guested in 2002 in the Bolshoi headquarters of the Orthodox Church in a way that was so lavish I was even embarrassed. But the thing is that they respect certain things. I mean, I respect, and I have some very good friends in the Russian government. So, but the problem is they're doing their own interest. Okay, they're doing their own interest. They have suffered under communists for so long.
Doing their own what? Sorry,
their own interest.
Oh,
I mean, they're interested because when they told me this very clearly, Leo. We saved the ass of Europe in the First World War, and then we ended up having the revolution as a result. We came then in 1945 to free Berlin, the whole show, and what did we get out of it?
18 million losses.
Yeah, and now we really didn't get much out of it. So, you know what, Leo? The third time these assholes call us, we're going to invade them. So, I mean, I understand their point. I understand their point. In fact, they still respect me, and I still have great friends in Russia, but they all understand my point. Because I'm not Russian and I have my own interests at that, which probably don't coincide with Russia. Though we have, I respect Dugin, I respect as a philosopher Dugin, but he's making the interest of the Russian people. And he's doing the right thing because you have to make the interest of your tribe. Globalization sucks, and we should all make the interest of our own tribes. Sit around table as heads of our own, and then they realize. Because then, if you give in to globalization, you say, okay, no borders, open everything, then you're just endorsing the crap of George Soros, who is the biggest criminal on this planet and should be arrested tomorrow.
But was it a question you actually asked?
No, it was just absolutely fascinating, this documentary, because he basically said how, this was during the communist time, not the Russians now, but during the communist time, how they would he was sort of an anthropologist, and he'd be sent to India, and then other people be sent to other cultures, and just all the time, propaganda, how great it was there, to show just how great it was. And it was all apparently a plan to bring down America, but I think it's not just bring down America, it's bring down the whole Western civilization, destroy God, spirituality, and people say...
That is the Jesuitical, that's been the Jesuitical devise.
Yeah.
Had I read the entire Jesuit oath, and I urge you go home and Google the Jesuit oath, the one that I excerpted from here, because in that you will absolutely understand all of this is articulated. This Luciferian globalist agenda and how it will be articulated. But it was essential, correct, it was essential to collapse the soul of humanity through Russia. Russia was collapsed through Wall Street fomenting the Bolshevik Revolution over 100 years ago, and has been an extension of Mossad and the Israeli apparatus in the modern context since the fall of the Cold War and the whole articulation between Reagan and Gorbachev. So you have to understand that Russia has been profoundly compromised as a nation. Profoundly compromised. It appears that Putin has been redeeming Russia from the jaws of this Jesuitical globalist nightmare. Because for sure, prior to Putin taking control, excising the oligarchs who had ransacked the Russian ruble, like Berezovsky and Khodorkovsky and Abramovich and all the rest of these thieving sons of bitches who should never have been allowed to run off with billions and billions of dollars stolen from the poor Russian people. But the same thing has been happening in America. Takedown of Russia, takedown of America, takedown of China was almost complete with Maoism. and has eventuated now into a nation of people who frog march along to the national anthem. And that they need to rehumanize as well, China, but they're doing it. The point is that same complex has been...
I have to stop here, because China is the biggest Jesuit stronghold ever.
Oh, it's massive.
They have even a shrine to one of the first Jesuits who was sent there by Ignazio Loyola. They have a shrine in the middle of Beijing. So I mean, China is really a Jesuit stronghold.
But I can tell you from the human trafficking side, always look for the bloodletting. And if you follow that, don't follow the money, follow the blood. And what we've learned about China with Jinping, this regime now is redeeming China from the Jesuitical globalist agenda, which was really locked and loaded. And in terms of trafficking and organ harvesting, which was rampant up until Jinping came in. Did you know that the last president of China is in prison today? Did you know that? It's amazing that we don't talk about the fact that the last president of China is languishing in a prison. Right, it's like Hillary Clinton being in a prison. We should know about it, but we don't.
The Vatican has made a deal with China to officialize their church. That means they have led to persecution all the underground Catholics that were underground until now. They have accepted and recognized the Pope, the communist bishops nominated by the communist government, because they're communists, they should never have been allowed to. So the fact that the Vatican, for the first time, first ever in 2018, has made a deal with communist China to make a Catholic communist version of their religion, well, you can't say that China is a Jesuit stronghold, and they are the leaders of evil. They are communists, man. And I fucking hate them.
But what you're describing is the letting off of steam. The Vatican is over, Leo. The Vatican is over.
The Vatican is going to be over when I'm with my tanks inside the middle square.
Which is coming.
Then maybe it's over. But at the moment it's not over because the very...
Can we get back to the heart? Can we get back to the heart? Well, I am a realist, but can we...
There was a time a few months ago.
Sorry, Debs, there's a gentleman behind you who's waiting.
What was the official police reason when they raided your home?
There was no, we didn't open the door and wouldn't let the 5 gents in. And there was no premise for them coming. But I did speak to a whistleblower, a policeman who kindly informed us that we should pull back in certain areas with the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, and we did pay attention to that information. There were a couple of things that we were about to unveil in the Judicial Commission seatings in Westminster, one of which involves a former Prime Minister of Great Britain having been a known child killer and rapist.
A friend of Jimmy Savile.
I didn't say anything. I simply said a former Prime Minister. And that was one of the objectives of the commission that we were invited to walk away from. And frankly, I do understand the argument. Increasingly, I understand that whilst we want full disclosure and that there should never be a small group of men smoking cigars deciding what people know, at the same time, if you were to release the plain truth to most people at any given time, you would bring about a kind of cultural cataclysm. And that can be very, very dangerous. Certainly in the United States, I feel deeply for Donald Trump. I understand that many people think he's a diabolical animal. I certainly don't. I use my own capacity to read a human being, and I have a tremendous empathy and affection for the man known as Donald Trump. And looking at
Donald.
What do you call it?
The Donald.
But
I'm the president. I am officially the president of Italian Sportrap, so I'm
the point is that with a man like Trump, albeit he is clearly a front who has been elected and somewhat engineered by a group of so-called white hats in the military-industrial basement, military intelligence basement. This is a very good thing. I believe that subsequent to 9/11 and the taking down of Twin Towers by the Saturnian cabal, a counter-coup was being engineered for that period of time. And I believe that Donald Trump has been the front of that counter-coup, and that counter-coup was successful in 2016. Why was it successful? The reason, I believe, is because simple NLP was actioned against the pulse of Midwest America. Make America great again. Brilliant. Just sheer monosyllabic NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and it worked. Whilst all the other political parties were being sophisticated and intellectual, coming up with all sorts of bullshit ideas about prosperity, he just stuck to the script, and that was enough to tap into the pulse of America and redeem the humanity. And I believe that that was
look at the situation now. We have Mueller, who is this attorney general.
We're going to get lost in the labyrinth if we look at all of these different...
No. But I'm telling you this. Italy, we have a president who used to be an attorney general as a magistrate. So Italy, you can rule, you can put any government, the populist and all that. They will do nothing because constitution is being rigged in 1945 because Italy has to pay because we were fascists. So now we have to be subject to communists for the rest of eternity. But this is a curse. And I said, I can't continue living in a place like this because it's rigged. The universities are rigged for 1968, you only the education. If you want to be a professor in Italy, you can have 3 degrees. If you're not communist, you can get a job. So you have to be left wing. And then you have America, that Trump can do all the laws he wants, but every now and then he gets blocked by the judiciary system. He's in the hands of those people that in 1968 played the hippie card, had a few joints, chilled out, Che Guevara saved the world. No, Che Guevara was a murderer, an assassin.
Thank you.
So you remember. And a psychopath. And another thing.
But tell us about
Mother Teresa. Fidel Castro, before dying, was in front of the Pope. Mother Teresa, there was a guy who went there for the case of sanity, called by the Vatican. And what happened was this. They interviewed him for 3 hours, and at one point he came out, and this you can find, there is a witness of this guy. This guy was called as a witness for the case of sanity. And he said, well, I don't know, the priests were laughing for 3 hours and things, but he said that basically Mother Teresa was the worst crook of all time. So I mean, these are people. It's all a fiction. It's an illusion, that we are endorsing.
Trump is a good guy, and the point is that
he's not the same.
A very difficult line. Any good leader today is having to walk an incredibly difficult line. I know I've been either blessed or cursed to have had meetings in the last 5 years with a number of political leaders and a handful of kings as well, as Chief Sylvester knows, the level that we do diplomacy at. But the point is that the leadership are compromised, deeply compromised. Those good leaders who want to get back into the cockpit and the helm are deeply compromised.
One quick thing with disclosure and truth and everything. For 30 years I've been so frustrated, I want all the truth to come out at once. It's a smelling salt for humanity to just let everyone know right up us up. The problem is if it all came out at once, the people have been tricked so brutally, I think there'd be so many riots and no one ever going to work and it'd be complete breakdown, which might not be so good. Well, maybe it would be better, I don't know. But that's what is being. People would be so pissed off that they've been hoodwinked for so long.
Boom. No, but that's why good leadership is unable and unwilling to just go into full disclosure, even though to some extent it might be possible. But don't forget, 1962, it actually was 1960 when JFK gave his famous speech talking about secret societies and wanting to out that stuff in the military-industrial basement. And that was half a century ago that brave man tried to articulate the need for full disclosure. And look what happened. We became locked, loaded, and weaponized as a direct result, as a global social ecology. So there was no possible way of us.
Today there is, I think, I don't know if it's the Daily Mail or whatever. They're bringing a full disclosure on Jeremy Corbyn, another crook of all time. This guy's a criminal. Not that the conservatives are any better. Here in England, you don't have anything. On the contrary of America, here, you don't have anything. Here, you should really have a revolution against the crown and the whole show. That's it.
One quick thing before I we spoke earlier, didn't we? About the crown, talking about the crown, the golden carriage. How much was it worth? Was it 50 million or something? You know, they've just spent 48 million to refurbish Buckingham Palace. That golden carriage, and she had the audacity recently to say, oh, I hate being in it, it's so uncomfortable. Well, bloody sell it and feed the world and put things right. It's disgraceful. They should check them out. Check them out. And make it a place for all the refugees to go from all the places she's
So
gone.
make Great Britain great again. That's it.
Yeah, I'll give you a card after this.
That is all we've got time for. Thanks all for coming. Give all our guests.